Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second day of the Mississippi Artificial Intelligence Regulation Task Force meetings. Welcome to your Capitol. If this is your first time to visit your Capitol, please take time to look around and see this beautiful building that belongs to you. I am Representative Jill Ford, and Senator Bart Williams, which is co-chair of this task force with me, sends his regrets for not being able to be here today, but has been chosen to attend an energy summit in Washington State. It was difficult for him to accept that invitation on such short notice, but I assured him I would do my best and ask Dr. Colin Napier with Mississippi Artificial Intelligence Network to stand in his stead. A couple items we need to address before we get started. First and foremost, I want to thank again Lonnie Edgar with the peer committee for securing the speakers, Terry Hammett for assisting with logistics, and Benjamin Eubanks for handling all the IT from recording live stream to our panelists on Zoom. Speaking of which, welcome to all attendees on Zoom today, and we will conclude each panel approximately 5 minutes early to allow the next panel to get started. When panelists are switching out, please feel free to take a break, but we will not have formal breaks due to time constraints. Please silence your cell phones and keep discussions respectful. Over the next day or this day, our goal is to listen and gather facts. This is an emotional issue, but I fully expect we can discuss this in a respectful manner. Artificial intelligence and data centers present enormous opportunities for Mississippi, but they also raise important questions about infrastructure, energy, water, workforce, and environmental stewardship. We've worked to bring everyone to the table, from the companies building these facilities to the agencies that regulate them, to the utility providers, local elected officials, economic developers, and citizens who have concerns. So we hear every perspective before making recommendations. I want to express my sincere appreciation to each of you. Thoughtful public policy strengthens when people are willing to participate. So thank you all for being here. It looks like we have a quorum again today. Would you please go around the table and introduce yourselves, task force?
Gregory Austin, Deputy Director of Policy in the Office of Mississippi Attorney General Win Fitch.
Jim Brinson. Brigadier General Jamie Hankins, Mississippi National Guard.
Dr. Colin Napier, Director of the Mississippi Artificial Intelligence Network.
And I'm Representative Jill Ford of Madison County, the Chairman of Technology in the House.
Gerard Gibbard, technology entrepreneur and host of Middays with Gerard, Super Talk, Mississippi.
Dr. Kerr Grosjean, Executive Director of the Mississippi Department of Technology.
Thank you all. This morning's first panel is the economic developers in Mississippi, but for three of you, I'm sorry. So please present your opening remarks and introduce yourself. After you've all given your opening remarks, I will invite the task force to present their questions. Speak into the microphone so this is being recorded, and make sure you press the button with the green light when you do. Go ahead. I would say, let's start with Mr. Joey Deason of Madison County.
Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity. My name is Joey Deason. I'm the Madison County Economic Development Authority Executive Director. I'm proud to be here, shed some light on some of the misinformation that I've been hearing throughout the state through local media, radio, LinkedIn, you name it. I've been in the very fortunate position of being the first project in the state of Mississippi to have AWS locate here. And I can tell you they're a great partner, and I am a large proponent. Thank you.
That's it.
That's it.
Unfortunately, I have more words than that. Members of the task force, thanks for the invitation. I'm Bill Cork, Executive Director of the Mississippi Development Authority. And before you should have my extended written remarks. I'm just going to give a thumbnail sketch of those in my opening remarks so we can get to questions for sure. MDA recruits capital investment and jobs to Mississippi, and we administer the incentive programs that this legislature has written into law. This morning, I want to make basically one argument. MDA's support for data center projects is conditional. It's not automatic. It's not unlimited. We support these investments if and only if three conditions precedent are met. The first, the local community must be fully behind the project. Economic development is not something the state does to a community. It is something we do with a community. When Amazon Web Services selected Madison County, the local economic development authority had pursued that project for almost 5 years and called it a full community effort. The same is true in Brandon and in Vicksburg and in Meridian and throughout the state with other investments that have come from the data center community. If a community doesn't want a project, MDA does not force a project on the community. Second, the certificated power company must be involved and supportive. No project moves forward in this state in the data center space without the certificated utility at the table from the very beginning. For AWS, Entergy Mississippi's commitment to meeting long-term power requirements was a key factor at every one of its Mississippi sites. This matters because the utility and not MDA and not the company is accountable for grid reliability and for every other customer on their system. Third, the project must qualify for the standard data center incentives that the legislature has defined in statute. Minimum capital investment requirements, new full-time jobs at 125% of the state average wage, in exchange for 10-year income and sales and use tax and franchise tax exemptions. Projects either meet the criteria or they do not. MDA does not invent tax policy, and we do not waive requirements. And while I'll be direct about what that means, when a project qualifies under the statute and has local support, I don't have the authority to say no. The legislature wrote the criteria. My job is to apply them faithfully. Some projects in our portfolio have drawn criticism. In one national group named my friend's project in Meridian, the worst economic development deal of 2025. And then the next week, another named it the best economic development deal of 2025. Compass qualified under the criteria you established in the legislature. Mississippi Power supported it. The community wanted it. And if this body concludes that those criteria should change, then that's your prerogative, and MDA will apply whatever is written into law. That is how the system is supposed to work. Beyond those conditions, the ancillary issues, water, wastewater, and power rates must be satisfactorily addressed by the requisite authorities. MDA is not a water permitting agency or a utility regulator, and you heard yesterday from DEQ and the Public Service Commission and the folks that govern those matters, and I thought their testimony was quite revealing and very candid, frankly. This legislature, people in this building, govern the entire framework. Questions about transparency and oversight have an address, and that address is in this building and in the commissions across the street. There's one exception to everything I just described, and I'm going to address that head on. AWS's project did not come through the standard data center program. It came through a special session of this legislature that started in January 2024, and it was different by design. Its initial project at $10 billion was the largest capital investment in state history at the time. And the package passed with one vote in opposition in each chamber. That's almost a couple of hundred people who've looked at that project and only 2 said no. If that deal was to be put in front of just the Public Service Commission, all opposition would have to do is convince 2 of the 3 members instead of the entire legislature to get a transformational project like that done. So it was wise and just that the legislature took on such a transformational project. In fact, I think it increases transparency and accountability more so than putting in the hand of a few elected officials. The structure was built to protect the state in the AWS deal. The legislature authorized Madison County to borrow up to $215 million for roads, water, and sewer, including $171.5 million for sewer, repaid by the fees the company pays the county in place of taxes. Sewer investment is the backbone of one of the most forward-looking water strategies in the United States. 100% of the water used at the Canton facilities will be recycled. Madison County and the Water Authority built the pipeline from the Big Black River so those data centers cool with the wastewater stream and not drinking water. And we heard all about that yesterday. Clinton project will use 0 water for cooling as far as we know. So when people worry that the data centers drain a community's drinking water, Mississippi's answer is engineering and not just talking points or social media press releases. Now, the repayment and the schedule that's attached to my written testimony, I think Joey will probably answer questions about it later, was something that we briefed to this legislature almost exactly in the current form in 2024, which means that we did exactly what we said we would do, and the company did exactly what it said it would do, and the community said and did exactly what it said it would do. Over 30 years, the projected revenue to Madison County, Ridgeland, the community college, and the Canton and Madison School District totals approximately $5 billion. When I briefed these estimates to the legislature during the special session, I told them that we thought these numbers were very close, and the actual numbers are coming in very close indeed. My point is simple. The exceptions we gave AWS were not a giveaway. They were a loan. It's being repaid. It's going to fund local schools and local governments for generations. And AWS was the first. And as a first adopter, it brought us credibility and national recognition. And the terms that we gave them reflected the moment. Every data center since that we've announced operates only on the standard statutory incentives alone. The record since January 2024 is pretty stellar. We've announced roughly $50 billion in projects in the last couple of years. And it's true that data centers are capital intensive and not labor intensive. The direct jobs are real and the wages are excellent. But here's what never makes the headlines. The direct jobs are the smallest part of the story. Last week, Jabil up in Marshall County announced 2,200 jobs in a 1.5 million square foot facility serving the data center infrastructure market. Howard Industries is adding more than 450 jobs across 3 counties. ABB is doubling its Senatobia footprint. Modine is adding more than 450 jobs in Grenada County, building data center chillers. Siemens Energy chose Rankin County for its first brand new American factory with $300 million investment and up to 300 jobs. And 3 weeks ago, Keytronic announced 376 jobs in Corinth. Mississippi isn't just hosting data centers. Mississippi is manufacturing the electrical backbone of the American grid build-out in communities all across this state and far from any of these server racks. And none of this happened by accident. By the time this build-out is complete, state and local governments will have invested more than $250 million in site development across 85 sites across the state, with nearly 50 million more in state appropriations headed to these sites this fiscal year. So Mississippi is ready before any prospect ever calls. Since 2020, we've closed more than 240 projects, and only a handful of those were data centers. The rest represent the vast majority of the more than 27,000 new jobs announced during this time period. Data centers are a chapter in Mississippi's story, but they're not the whole story. Finally, utility rates, because they get the most attention. We heard a really, really good presentation yesterday from Entergy, and I encourage anybody who did not see that yesterday to watch the tape because it was the most transparent I've ever seen on the subject of what's going on with the utility rates. But I'll tell you this, MDA does not regulate utility rates. Every rate a Mississippi household pays is set through mechanisms supervised by the Public Service Commission, by TVA, or through member-owned cooperatives. And for Entergy and Mississippi Power, which serve AWS, Avio, and Compass, all of it is filed publicly, sits on the docket for anyone in this room to read. XAI in South Haven is a different arrangement, building its own behind-the-meter generation with its own set of regulatory authorities. The special session bill requires AWS to pay the incremental cost of its own service. The governor's instruction from the first conversation was that this cannot harm other customers, and the law reflects it. Entergy's leadership represented consistently, publicly, directly to me and the governor, that there has been no residential rate impact from these data centers. They needed 2 new power plants in the early 2030s regardless, because AWS and Avio arrived. Those plants are being built now with data centers paying a majority of the cost, as you heard yesterday. A review this spring of 11 qualitative studies commissioned, I'll note, by the Data Center Coalition, which appears before you later this morning, found no historical evidence that data centers have shifted electricity costs onto residential customers. But let me be careful about what I am and not in a position to tell you. MDA does not have visibility into the utilities cost allocation. I rely on the company's representations, and it's entirely fair for this task force and the Public Service Commission to ask the utility to validate. That is precisely what the Public Service Commission exists to do. And you heard yesterday, that's precisely what they've done. The contrary claims circulating are, by their own author's admission, estimates carrying considerable uncertainty. No such cost causation claim has been established in any commission proceeding. It's an inference, not a finding. The way to settle it is not in competing press releases, it's in the docket. And if this legislature concludes that greater transparency or standardized contract terms would inspire greater public confidence, then so be it. And you can also live with the response that the business community will give to any new regulations. That's the way the free market works. MDA will apply whatever framework you write, and these projects, I'm confident, will stand scrutiny. So let me close where I began. Our support's conditional. The community must be behind it. The certificated utility must be at the table. The project must qualify under the criteria the legislature wrote. The one exception was a deliberate act of this legislature, structured as a loan that is being repaid ahead of a generation of local revenue. And around these projects, a manufacturing ecosystem is putting thousands of Mississippians to work, building the electrical infrastructure of the American economy. The governor calls that the digital delta. Thank you, and I'm glad to answer your questions.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity for letting us speak here with you this morning. My name is Bill Hanna. I'm the president of the East Mississippi Business Development Corporation, which is the Chamber of Commerce, the Economic Development Organization, and the Main Street Organization for Lauderdale County, City of Meridian, Town of Marion. As of March 2024, and our project is a little different, doesn't get the headlines that many do, so I want to take a second, just explain what Compass is, as their guy just walked in. Good morning, Brett. As of March 2024, we've been working with Mississippi Power, Mississippi Development Authority, Lauderdale County, and the City of Meridian on a project for Compass data centers. So the last couple of years. This project was announced in January of 2025 as a $10 billion, 8-building campus of buildings that would use about 500 megawatts of power. Each of these buildings are about 250,000 square feet each, so a couple of million square feet on the campus. Compass Data Centers began their site work in June of 2025, so about a year ago. And their first panel on the first building was set in February, this past February. To date, Building 1 is close to being completed, actually is scheduled to be operational in November. And Building 3 looks to be about 65% complete, with a schedule of being operational 6 months after Building 1 is operational. And then going forward, the plan is to have a building completed and operational about every 6 months. So construction on the site will be over the next 3 or 4 years. I should say here, Compass Data Centers is a co-locator company, meaning in our case, Compass Data Centers purchased the site, they developed the site, they built the buildings, and now they own the buildings. Their lease, or they lease their facilities to one of their customers, one of the 5 or 6 large hyperscalers. And again, in our case, that's Meta. Meta is the customer for Compass Data Centers in Meridian, and Meta is leasing all of the buildings that are being built. From the first day we met Compass Data Centers, again, which was in March 2024, they have continued to impress us with a very open way of doing business, very professional, very hands-on. And I should say, at least initially, we got a lot of our comfort from Mississippi Power. because Compass took a team of folks out to Red Oak, Texas, which is a large campus of buildings, very similar to ours, about 2 or 3 years in front of us. And 12 of the Mississippi Power engineers that went on that trip came back and was telling us, if you're going to do this, this is the way to do it. This is how you do it. The systems, the operations, they've got it, they're nailing it. And you've got a great client here in Meridian. I know Brett Collard will be here speaking to you from Compass in a little bit. So I'll save some of what I'd love to say about Compass for him. But that's pretty much it. I'm answering any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much. We'll allow the task force to now ask questions.
I'll start. And again, thank you all for being here. I'm going to start with Mr. Cork. Your testimony describes roughly 50 billion in announced investment in about 2 years, with commitments still growing. What has made Mississippi competitive, and what will keep Mississippi competitive for the operations, supplier, and adjacent industry jobs that could follow?
I think there was a confluence of events that happened all at the same time that really put Mississippi in a position to win these projects. The two things that I think were critical is that we were long in power. Most of our power companies had extra power that they needed to sell, that we were paying the overhead for, but just sitting there not being used. So that was one thing. The second thing was the completion of 2 transcontinental dark fiber routes, one that connected Chicago to New Orleans and the other one that connected Dallas out to Atlanta and up to the East Coast. And those cross right here, right underneath the stack here in Jackson. And when that completed, you now had available land, available power, available water, and available fiber. And you don't have to do much when you've got all those things in one place. They will find you. And that's what's happened. We never really went on a massive recruiting effort for these companies. The power companies pretty much led the way in communicating with the companies, and the communities, once they were contacted, responded favorably. Not every community that got looked at responded favorably, and not every community that got looked at got selected. But there is a lot more activity in the market. The pipeline is still loaded with opportunities, and I foresee in the reasonable near future that we'll see more of those. I think the second part of your question was sort of the spinoff jobs and the forecast for that. Well, look, I mean, this is a once in a generation investment. I mean, trillions of dollars are going to be spent on this. And, I don't care what your view of the world is, or whether you like data centers or don't like AI, or what the issue is. If you're an economic developer, you catch this wave once in a lifetime, maybe once in a generation, or in more than one generation. And I just don't think Mississippi was going to sit by with the assets we had and watch these opportunities just drive past down the highway to places that were second, like Arkansas and Shreveport, Louisiana, and places in Texas. We were first because we got our act together. We realized we had a competitive advantage, and that with a few minor tweaks to our existing legislative authorities, we could rapidly capture and close these deals with insane speed. And when you're catching a bow wave, speed to market is absolutely the most critical driver for these companies. And AWS will probably tell you that the reason they were here was because we could deliver quickly. The community could deliver quickly. Elon Musk said XAI located in South Haven because of Mississippi's insane speed. And that's his quote in his press release. So, that's the reason why I think we're being successful, is because we responded and we did what companies expect of government, which is to get out of the way and create a pathway for them to be successful. The national trend, the national investment, is something we had a natural competitive advantage for already. We were the nation's leading exporter of electronic transformers, switchgear, and other products. And so you're seeing Siemens and Howard and a number of these other existing companies just absolutely capture that market and grow and expand as that trend grows. And then we're attracting new investment and expansions from companies like ABB and Keytronic and Jabil, who are here. Jabil announced a medical device or medical X-ray scanning technology and fell in love with that, totally unrelated to data centers, but fell in love with Mississippi and decided to make their next expansion here for their data center infrastructure play because we had such a great business environment. So, you know, when you do things right in the business community, you know, success begets success. That's what the governor says all the time. And I just am firmly convinced that's the reason why we're doing so well in this area. I think the biggest challenge right now is workforce. And you talked about that yesterday with Dr. Taylor. And, you know, we've got to make sure that Mississippians are benefiting from this growth. But those are human capital concerns and those are hard things to do. And we got to get the opportunities in front of people and show them what the way forward is and hope some of our Mississippi citizens will bite on those opportunities.
Thanks for being here, guys. Mr. Deason, question for you. One of the criticisms I've seen floating around is that the state of Mississippi literally donated the land upon which Amazon is building at the Canton campus, donated it to them without any encumbrances whatsoever. Can you describe who owned the land that Amazon is using to build the North Campus there in Madison County? And can you tell us what the sunk costs were in that land and then the ultimate sales price and whether or not any gain was realized as part of that transaction?
Yes, be glad to address that question. Number one, when I came on board 9 years ago, the mega site, which was out on Highway 22 west of Canton, it was under option. The option prices were extremely high. As a public agency, you have to have a appraisal. So we went and had an appraisal done and the value of the options were very different from what the appraisal came back in. We were very fortunate. We had a quick win with a company called Fastenal, and we were able to generate about $3.8 million, of which we went to the family that owned the property, and we negotiated with them to purchase about 350 acres using Makita's money. When that 350 acres was purchased, Entergy put a substation on it. Entergy wanted a mega site. They wanted something that was similar to TVA, Mississippi Power, and some of the other sites. So we had 350 acres. Amazon.com came calling, and that's the 3 million square foot, 4-story, 4,500 robot fulfillment center that is also located directly there. When that occurred, Madison County then took the initiative to go and purchase the property directly from the landowners. So we purchased all of it with the exception of about 115 acres, which in my estimation was a little overpriced, but we knew that it was a good location. So at that point, we owned about 850 acres. When we started negotiating directly with AWS, our sunk cost, I believe, in that property at that point was about $12,000 an acre, and we wound up selling it to AWS for about $30,000 an acre.
Mr. Deason, I will follow up with a question to you. I brought an article from our local newspaper. It's right behind me if anyone's interested. Summarizing the economic benefits of Madison County project. Would you mind summarizing the estimated economic benefits for those who may not have seen this article in the Madison County Journal?
Yes, ma'am, glad to. First of all, I've heard Dr. Napier and I've heard Executive Director Bill Cork state this as well about the investment. I can't speak for all the projects in the state of Mississippi, but I can speak for the ones in Madison County. And what I can tell you is those numbers that Bill are representing and that are commitments, okay? And what I have seen, they underpromise and way over deliver. So that $50 billion number is going to go way north at some point in the future. The other thing that I heard addressed obviously was the number of jobs. With the second phase that has been announced by AWS in Madison County, we're talking 1,700 jobs at $80,000 a year on average. That's what the commitment is. Of that 1,700 jobs, already 750 have been hired, 60% of which are Mississippians. So I've heard people say that they're all coming from out of state, overseas, et cetera. That's exactly not true. directly from AWS's HR team that focuses on supplying the talent for these locations. They've been amazed at the level of talent that they have located directly here in Mississippi. Not only were we an untapped market, whether it was power, land, business climate, but it was also talent related as well. So right now, when you look out, we have two campuses, two hyperscale data centers. They're 2,250 acres. If you fly in and out of Jackson, this is not a secret, okay? There are 5 buildings that are operational today at Jan 100 west of Canton. So if there's anyone in this that's listening, that's here in this room, I ask you to just go out and take a look at it. You can see it, you can hear it, you can almost touch it, okay? And a lot of the things that I've heard in the past are not true for my project, okay? If you fly in and out, you'll see that there's another 5 buildings that are already up and should be operational at the Ridgeland campus this year. If you look back down at the Jan 100 campus, there's another 7. So if you're doing the math, that's 5, 5, and 7. That's 17 buildings that are vertical right now that are going operational.
Thank you. Mr. Cork, we appreciate your leadership at MDA. Several years ago, Mississippi became hailed as technology destination. Now, fast forward to today, there are a lot of concerns around data centers. How has the largest economic development projects in our state's history become so controversial?
Well, I think there's a lot of people who are just concerned about the technology itself. I think that's one of the biggest risks with AI is just it's an infantile technology. It's only really kind of come into the world's focus in the last 2 years, and it's rapidly changing a lot about the way we live, work, and interact with each other. And I think that's creating it's fear. And every time we've had a major technological transformation in history, our culture has gone through a similar type of reaction. And so you associate that fear with, what they see as the root cause of data centers. Now, I think there are, like with any industrial development, there are not in my backyard kind of issues. There's issues related to sight lines and noise and lighting at night and anything like that. And so these projects do have to, they're integrated into a community and they have to receive community support, just like any other industrial project. It's like any other warehouse or manufacturing operation that's going to locate in a community. I think that there's really been, in my experience, I've been doing economic development for 30 years. There's been no difference in the way that data centers have approached site selection and site identification and implementation than any other large-scale industrial or warehousing developer. I think they're getting they're being treated unfairly because, as I mentioned, we have 240 projects we've closed throughout the state, but I've got 6 that are drawing concerns. Nobody talked to me about a heat dome over the Aluminum Dynamics arc furnace, but yet we're hearing that about data centers. So I just think it's a bit of an unfair kind of comparison. And I think there's a different standard being applied here than I think is warranted. And by the way, I think Aluminum Dynamics is doing a fantastic job, not trying to point the fingers at anybody, but we've got steel mills in Metro Jackson, folks. No one's complaining about that. But yet we have these data centers which literally look like a warehouse when you drive by. There's no trucks coming and going. There's very few cars coming in and out. But yet all of a sudden we have this hysteria that's generated. And I think Mr. Deason has made the point is how many people have actually gone and looked? I think if you do, I think you can solve a lot of those problems. Now, that's not to say that the temporary generation in South Haven doesn't create noise. It does. I understand that SpaceX AI has also invested over $8 million in soundproofing barrier walls, and they're considering berming and other things. They're trying to work with the community to work through that process until the permanent generation comes online. But I don't think it's been exploitative. I think it's been an open process, and they're trying to solve the problems that come up. But I would also just point out in terms of the broader scope of what AI offers, we're in a national security and a national economic race with near peer foreign powers. And somebody is going to have to produce this artificial intelligence to combat these near peer adversaries throughout the world. We have done this many, many times in other ways with our shipyards, with commercial space and government space. Most people don't realize that we are home already and have been for decades to 4 of the 6 largest supercomputers that support the Department of War. Those are in massive data centers that have existed in Mississippi for years, and no one said boo about it. So I would just simply say that this is an extension of who we are, and that a lot of outside the state agitators have started to come in here and wax poetic about the higher level, higher platitude issues, and haven't really been on the ground with our friends in the communities and working through these issues to try to compete and win, not only for our state, but for the nation as we compete in the world.
Thank you. Gerard.
Mr. Corr, question for you. Is economic development competitive?
Yes.
Did the state of Mississippi engage in competition for these various data center projects?
Yes.
Were tax incentives provided to these projects in accordance with state law?
When we were in the negotiations with AWS, they were very clear to us about what the competitive landscape looked like and provided copies of the competing states' tax programs just to let us be aware of how deficient we were.
So is it fair to say that the tax incentives authorized by SB 2001 that were provided to AWS were critical, essential to landing that project?
AWS, which is one of the world's largest and most successful companies, along with many of the other companies like Meta and those that are in the market, have many options, not only in the United States, but around the world to locate their capital investment. And they are going to go where they are treated the best, where they have the best customer service, and where they have the lowest overall cost of operations. And why would they not do that? You do that with your business. My wife does that with her business. So yeah, it's common sense.
So one of the criticisms that I'm sure you guys are aware of, and everybody in this room is that the state of Mississippi is essentially giving away the farm from a tax perspective, in that this is actually costing taxpayers money because of the incentives. The question is, if AWS had elected not to invest in the state of Mississippi, how much tax revenue would the state of Mississippi receive from AWS?
That would be exactly 0 from their data center business.
But in your testimony, you indicated that they will pay some $5 billion of taxes over 30 years.
That's just in local.
I think that's way low, actually. As you know, that doesn't account for all of the other taxes paid by other companies, employees, et cetera, that will be servicing the facility. As
All
you
those
know.
indirect and induced
Right.
multiplier effects from the project, which are just staggering.
So it's possible that AWS could become the largest taxpayer in the entire state of Mississippi before it's all said and done.
Yeah, especially if you look at their overall portfolio of not only the data center business, but their e-commerce business and everything else, they will clearly be.
So to just kind of wrap it up, this is a net gain in terms of tax revenue to the taxpayers of the state of Mississippi.
It is, but let me also just point this out, and I use the term tax incentive, and it's really, I hate using the term tax incentive, because when we create tax policy, which is what this does, we create tax policy all the time. We reduce the grocery tax. We're working to eliminate the personal income tax. We had a schema around our personal income tax, which reduced the first $30,000 or $50,000 a year of income from taxation. You wouldn't say that reducing the grocery tax is going to incentivize more honey buns or a giveaway to, you know, our citizens. You wouldn't argue that reducing or eliminating the personal income tax is an inducement for spendthrift spending or some sort of it's tax policy. And I just point out that any company, and I want to make sure this gets on the record and the whole world hears it, any company that comes to Mississippi that invests a minimum of $2.5 million gets a sales and use tax exemption on all of their equipment and their building construction. It's a very low threshold. We call that the MFLEX program. It incentivizes the labor and it incentivizes the sales and use tax on the purchases. AWS, the data centers at Compass and Avio, they're just getting the same thing that a $2.5 million investor would get. It's just a much bigger scale. How do you call that a giveaway? I call it really sound tax policy that's inducing a massive amount of over 80 billion in capital investment to this state and creating over almost 28,000 jobs. And if that ain't good, I don't know what to tell you. So I don't know what giving away is, but I certainly don't mind paying less taxes, and I don't think the companies do either. In fact, I'd really rather give the legislature less of our tax money so they don't blow it on things we don't need.
First, I wanted to say that Dr. Taylor, I think, did an amazing job yesterday, as she always does. And I get to travel a lot, and I get to talk about what Dr. Taylor's doing in the state, as well as Collins Group in terms of that workforce piece. Let me start with a little vignette. Many years ago, I was on a trip in Charlotte, North Carolina, and spent a good bit of time downtown eating great food, including great cornbread. But I wandered into a little museum of how Charlotte went from sort of an agrarian and agriculturally based economy to banking. The thing I walked away with was leadership, strategic vision, and execution over time. So first, let me just say thank you for what it is that you do. I think the other question, of which I would submit that I have very little expertise, if any, in, is this idea of capitalizing on these wins. You know, we have these data center wins, we have other businesses investing. What does that spiral look like, where the private sector, our elected leaders in government, our amazing research universities are creating this ecosystem? What does that future look like, or how, with the leadership we have, are we heading in that direction?
I'll talk about it and I'll turn it over to my colleagues. Look, 2 years ago, if you asked me where we would be with AI and data centers, I wouldn't have been able to predict the future. So I think what I like to do from our way we implement things at MDA, and I think the governor really leads out on this, is we want to create the conditions precedent to business success, regardless of how it comes. And we want to condition the battle space around reskilling and upskilling our workforce to adapt to the world of the future. As the governor says, for the jobs of the next 50 years, not the jobs for the last 50 years. I think what we've successfully done through the legislative initiatives, through great thinking around the cabinet and through the various departments, and also the work of the local communities and universities and community colleges, is we've kind of gotten out of this 19th and 20th century mindset and put Mississippi on the map to making our size an advantage. Being small allows us to be nimble. It allows us to pivot. It allows us to do the kind of things that the tech sector in particular is demanding of places. And so I don't know what the future holds, but I know that if we continue to maintain a culture and the momentum that we have around being able to be quick, to be nimble, to be responsive, and to understand how the business community thinks about their decision making, and then align our strategies to them as they change and migrate, we're going to have a very, very successful future to build on the massive success we have today. So I'd love to be able to predict the future. As I think it was said yesterday, if I could predict the future, I wouldn't be in this job. I'd be doing something else. But I have seen a glimpse, working with these amazing companies very closely and their tenants. I've seen a glimpse of the future, and I'm telling you, it's exciting. The optimism that I have for Mississippi going forward, and how AI in particular is going to transform rural healthcare, and how it's going to transform education, and how it's going to democratize information and knowledge in a way that Mississippi will no longer have to struggle through existing systems to build our way out of some of the rankings we've had in the past. I just fully believe that this is a future that we should express some optimism around, and I look forward to being part of that going forward.
I would answer that I'll take everything that Bill has said and just make it really local. Compass has, and we're newer, so our campus is not working yet, and it's still being built as we speak, but Compass is already, the only thing they don't like about Meridian is they want it to be bigger and they want it to go faster. But with those, they're on a 300-acre site. We're working with them right now to get them 100 acres in addition to those 300, so they can put up a couple of other buildings. To do that, they've got to relocate an existing facility, which is the Highway Patrol, which the legislature through this last session passed a bill that allows the Department of Public Safety to sell that to Compass. Compass is paying for that, and though it's not announced yet, there's some cool things that are going to happen when that gets relocated that impacts not only Compass and their facility and their operations, not only the Highway Patrol, but our entire downtown. I wish I could talk more about it because it's really, really cool. And it's a domino effect that's going to affect everybody in Lauderdale County. The other thing I would say, again, it's not announced yet, but we've got a cool program that they're bringing to train people that they've started at Texas State Technical College. They're going to bring it to MCC, Meridian Community College. So hang around July 31st at about 11 o'clock. There'll be an announcement for that program. Again, it just, as Bill and Joey have said, it's just the beginning, and it just keeps feeding and growing and impacting more and more.
You know, the state of Mississippi has always been known as an agricultural state. Then we became known as a manufacturing state. And I've heard consultants, stay in your lane, you know, do what you're good at. Well, all of a sudden, we've had the Band-Aid or the mask ripped off, and there's another value. It's technology, it's data centers, it's IT, it's all the businesses that Bill has just mentioned, but there's also other businesses that you don't even hear about. We've got about 200 new employees that are working for 3 different companies that are all related to data centers. That didn't require a thing, okay? Dr. Orgeron, you mentioned about the future. I can't tell you what the future is going to hold, but I can tell you what the predictors are for a local community right now. Bill and the governor and his team do a great job of highlighting how Mississippi has moved forward in all these different categories. I think it was 2 days ago that I saw that Madison County had increased by almost 2,000 people, okay? That's an increase, and I see it every day. I live in the city of Madison. I see the tags from Utah, from Texas, from North Carolina, and they're at Kroger. They're not coming off the interstate, and they're not getting gas and then getting back on the interstate. One of the other predictors that we looked at, and there again, can't tell you for the future, but you can look at data points today. So number 1 is growth for population. Number 2 is the per capita income. If you haven't noticed, Madison County is in the top 4% in the United States. There's 3,115 counties, plus or minus, in the U.S. Madison County is in the top 4%. We are the only county that's in the top 4%. And look, I wish all 81 of them were in the top 4%, and that would be my goal.
Mr. Austin?
Mr. Cork, you talked about some of the other states when y'all were competing for these, the great success y'all have had with these projects. In your opinion, is there other policy changes that need to be made at the state legislative level, or what other states do differently in regards to not just tax policy, but any other, policy that these states have that make them as competitive as Mississippi is, that Mississippi needs to look at in the future? Or, what's on the horizon as far as, the changes that we need to be able to adapt to remain competitive and, maintain the success that you and the state has had?
That's a really good question. I noticed when you asked, the best practices from the first panel yesterday morning, you didn't get any good answers except moratorium. So I'll try to give you a good answer. I think the truth right now is, we don't need to make any changes. I think the local communities are doing a very good job in vetting projects. I think our tax incentives are, very competitive with our neighboring states. There has been some interest in being able to support more of a perpetual sales and use tax exemption for data centers because, they have these big racks and servers on the inside and they got to replace them every couple of years. And I know the industry has been really interested in pushing to have that where they don't have to come back and reapply, to make it a little easier and more business friendly on them. I think that's worthy of consideration. We actually built that into the HB 2001 bill for Amazon. So they had a minimum threshold of annual investment to automatically recertify, but that is not the case with the other data centers. So I think that's a policy tweak that is worthy of consideration. And I know Senate Finance last year actually took up a bill to try to do something there, and we'll see where that goes. In terms of the environmental related issues, I think the DEQ does an absolutely fantastic job of regulating these projects, given the framework. I don't think we've seen anything that I would change on the environmental regulations. I think there are some gaps right now. The third area, I would say there's some gaps in some gray areas in the current law related to behind the meter power that eventually this legislature is going to have to grapple with. I don't know what the answer to that is. We believe we'd like to try to do a test run with a real one of those projects before we try to get into a public debate about what it should be. Let's run one through the mill and see what it is. It's what we did for AWS, by the way, as we took the first early adopter and tried to craft around that. I think some evidence that we've had some problem with that policy is what you may be familiar with, the Prado AI project in Ridgeland, which had a false start with the Public Service Commission. They were seeking a declaratory injunction or declaratory opinion on a behind the meter power solution. And then I think the commission came back and rightfully said, look, we don't have enough information. And they were using that as a vehicle to try to shape public policy. And I think the right place to have that happen is at the legislature, not at the Public Service Commission. When it comes to the issues of noise and local issues of that nature, those are local matters that should stay local. I strongly believe in the concept of subsidiarity where, Lauderdale County and Madison County and places like that ought to decide for themselves what they want in their community. The city of Jackson's got a moratorium right now, fine. You want to sit down and figure it out. I think the local communities should decide that. But I will say this, some of these communities that are entertaining data centers better make sure they have good zoning, good noise ordinances, good land use planning things. I mean, this is no different than any other industrial development. And I would suggest that communities that want industrial development ought to be thinking the same way, regardless of whether it's a data center or a manufacturer or a warehouse. Make sure that you have built into your planning and zoning the kind of things that you can communicate to a company up front and then live with that. Because what companies don't like is uncertainty. They don't want to come in thinking I'm following the rules. And then there's a firestorm of controversy after the fact. And that's the worst thing that can happen to a community in economic development. So I encourage communities to get out there and regulate themselves on what they want and what they don't want in their community. There's nothing wrong with that. I lived in Bay St. Louis and suggested one time that maybe we could build some high density, high rise condos on the beach, and I about got tarred and feathered and run out of town. I mean, you're not going to build those in Bay St. Louis, and there's nothing wrong with that. Communities should be able to create the environment that they want to live in. And I would say that to the citizens in South Haven, like I would say to the citizens in Greenville or anywhere else. Get out in front of it. If you want growth, plan for it. And that's the local regulatory advice I would give.
Thank you. Just one other quick question. Is there anything you can share in this setting as far as, the adjacent ecosystem? This is impressive with Howard Industries, ABB, Modine, as far as, numbers or percentages on how much of these expansions are going to supply directly Mississippi data centers as opposed to, data centers regionally or, obviously outside of the state, just any kind of breakdown on is this, directly to support Mississippi, or is it for, other data centers or other, industry outside of the state as well?
Yeah, we don't ask companies for their order book when they're doing expansion, so I really don't have a really good handle on it, but anecdotally, every single one of them is thrilled to be expanding here because they know we're friendly to the data center business and that their potential customers will be proximate to where they are, and that's an advantage on a logistics basis. So, but I don't have a specific order book or know like what percentage or anything like that.
Quick question for Mr. Gibbert.
Yeah, for Mr. Deason, approximately how many Mississippi-based companies have been involved in the AWS construction project?
Approximately 80, and we're still counting.
Are they reporting good relationships with AWS?
Absolutely. In so much that a lot of these companies have moved with AWS to other states and started operations in other states. And not only AWS, but some of the construction companies as well has picked up some of our local companies and taken them with them to other states. So they've expanded.
Dr. Napier.
Thank you all again for your time. To round us out for this session or this panel, and this is a question for any or all to answer. And I understand a lot of this development will not be completed in 5 years. It's ongoing, it's continual. But if we were to look 5 years out, what measurable outcome would demonstrate to Mississippians that these developments succeeded for them?
Well, from a local perspective, from Madison County, I'm going to tell you, being home to the state's largest airport, local people, when they fly in and out, or visitors, they're going to see 2 massive campuses. They're going to see multiple data centers, and they're going to see that the footprint's changed. It's just like when you fly into DC now. If you haven't been, or if you ever have the chance, I know a lot of you go to DC, go to Loudoun County, go visit. That's the data center capital of the world. They have approximately 362 data centers with 48 under construction right now. Look at the home values. Look at how close they're building neighborhoods. Just take a look. You'll see that when you fly into DC, you see the changes. I think in 5 years, you're going to see those changes here. And you're not just going to see them in the metropolitan area. This data center industry can change the Delta. It can change areas that we never thought would have a large project and create revenue for some of these communities that don't have a large tax base. So I think you're going to see it here, and I think you're going to see it in places south of I-20, north of I-20, and the Delta. So you're going to see a change.
I would say, and again, in Meridian, in 5 years, the Lauderdale County is gonna be building and improving our community. The city of Meridian will be adding to what, I'm sitting here looking at the mayor as he's smiling. This is just giddy stuff. It's so much money, and the schools will be benefiting as well. And in our case, downtown is going to be a direct beneficiary to the Compass Data Center project that's coming. It's going to be as good as it is, and people around Meridian think our downtown has just gotten so much better, and it's not even started. It's going to be really cool.
When I first took the role at MDA as Deputy Director and Chief Economic Development Officer in October 2020, I asked Governor Reeves what was his #1 objective for economic development for the state, so that I could make sure that #1, I was aligned with that, and #2, whether we could deliver it. And he was very, very clear. He said, I want more people in Mississippi working, and I want them making higher wages. He's been singularly focused on this since he got elected in 2020, and that has been the mission of the Mississippi Development Authority, if you could break it down into one simple metric. I hope 5 years from now, when the trailing jobs are all filled from these 28,000 we've announced, that these are human beings, fellow Mississippians that have hope and opportunity, that are making a $65,000, $75,000, $85,000, $100,000 family sustaining wage with amazing benefits, with a company that has corporate responsibility, and that they're paying for T-ball games and putting money in the church plate, and all that. That's what I hope happens in 5 years. If that doesn't happen, I think we've had a big failure, but my prayer is that it will. And that's why I wake up and do this every single day.
Thank you, gentlemen. It has been an honor to have you with us today, and thank you for giving us your time and your truthful statements. I appreciate you. The next panel, local government, can come to the table now.
Crazy is how difficult it was to sell these services to every single one that I've seen. We had a hard time convincing. We had some great to really. Okay, this one, I want to Microsoft. That were allowed basically any application of and you can find that's part of that. One of my favorites. Yeah, I was pioneering. You know, WebEx, like all of what it do.
Yeah.
Be in the pilot program, we could give you vitamins, but like, oh no, we don't use it.
We needed a COVID.
I didn't know.
Yeah, this one. You don't use it for
The future. You can't predict it, can you? Okay, y'all ready to get started? Welcome panelists from our local government. Before you present your opening remarks, which I'm going to ask them to be 5 minutes or less, had no idea Mr. Cork was going to take so long on his opening remarks. Would you please introduce yourself and the city that you represent after you've given your open remarks? I will ask the task force to present their questions. Please speak into the microphone. This is being recorded and you push the button and say the green light. Thank you. We want to start with the mayor from Brandon.
Thank you, madam. Appreciate that. Good morning, everyone. Almost would rather you start on the other end with the big mayor on the other side down there. Anyway, Butch Lee, Mayor Brandon, appreciate this time, appreciate this opportunity, appreciate this gathering. A lot of information has come at you. I can speak to the fact that I've been speaking to the company that is looking at Brandon for the last 3 years. Have digested a lot, depending on what I've learned from energy, what I've learned from water, and the constant barrage of things that we get through social media and people interact with us. I'm sure every one of these people up here is going to tell you the same thing. I have taken it upon myself to do some of my own independent studies. That would be things like taking a sound meter and going to Memphis and going to Colossus 1, Colossus 2, and every other data center I could find, which was actually 13 in the Memphis market. I've been in Madison County. Very much appreciate the work that Mr. Deason has done. Appreciate the work that Mr. Bill Cork has done, and I appreciate the work the legislature has done. And if I had one underlying message to the legislature, and again, this is all off the cuff, I don't typically prepare statements. So if I had to look at you and say to the legislature, I'd say one thing: don't monkey with it. You've got a good thing going. We're in a generational change that only happens once, maybe every other or every third lifetime. And I can go back in time and tell you story after story after story about when the interstate was built and how it changed our national politics and changed the whole world that we live in. I can tell you that when Jimmy Carter was president, and it was a going joke that we were going to put computers in cars for better fuel efficiency, and everybody thought that was the biggest joke in the world. Some of you are old enough to remember that. And you fast forward to today and you've got Teslas running around that have 30 or 40 chips in them running the car. But in that change to preserve fuel, we actually lost about 450,000 jobs in the United States because we weren't making manual carburetors anymore. And that was just a global change. These things happen over time, and either you recognize it and seize it and go with it, or you're left behind. And I think it's time for the state of Mississippi to take a giant leap forward. I would encourage you to do more to assist local government any way possible to make these things happen. This is real. It's not going to change. We're either going to grab a piece of it or we're going to let it go behind. You can look at the state's history. Just look at Delta Airlines. It started here in Mississippi, and now it's the hub of Atlanta. You know what's happened to Atlanta. You look at banking and what happened to Charlotte, North Carolina. You know, it's the central hub of all the banking. And we have, look at Texas, oil and gas. So we have an opportunity to take a stake and put it in the ground and say what we're going to do here in Mississippi. And I think these mayors will agree with that we need to seize that opportunity and find ways to solidify it. There you go. Okay.
To our Representative Ford and to the committee here, I just want to first of all say good morning and thank you all for inviting me as Mayor of Meridian to this meeting this morning. My name again is Percy Bland. I'm the mayor of the city of Meridian. Our city has always been a place of innovation. We have a proud history of manufacturing, transportation, military service, healthcare, education, and also entrepreneurship. We've always been a city that works. We know how to adapt and we know how to build. Today, we are investing in our place. Every day, we're improving our neighborhoods, strengthening public safety, growing our economy, supporting our local schools and educational partners, and creating the kind of community where people want to live, work, and raise a family. We believe talent follows place and capital follows talent. Our responsibility is to create both. Meridian, Mississippi has that place. We have the infrastructure, we have the educational institutions, we have the transportation network, we have the military presence, and we have the workforce. But most importantly, we have the people who are hardworking, innovative, and ready for the opportunities of tomorrow. That is why this investment is so important to me, to us, and to our team. We have been very excited to welcome Compass Data Centers because we see this as a partnership built on shared values and long-term investment. This is an opportunity to shine a light on Meridian, Mississippi, and show the country what our community has to offer. Our team traveled, like Bill talked about earlier, to Red Oak, Texas, because we wanted firsthand knowledge. We wanted the facts and not assumptions and not the hearsay that so many of us hear about these data centers. We spoke with the local leaders, we toured the campus, and we asked the difficult questions. What we found was encouraging. Many of the concerns we had heard simply did not reflect what we experienced. We found a professional operation, a responsible corporate partner, and a community that had embraced the opportunity while continuing to grow and thrive. That experience gave us confidence, but more importantly, it reinforced the importance of making decisions based on facts, transparency, and real-world experience. I understand why questions are being asked. Questions are part of good government, and this task force is performing an important service for our state. We appreciate that work, but also believe leadership requires us to recognize opportunity when it stands before us. Communities spend decades hoping for a transformational investment. Very few ever have that chance to welcome one. Meridian does. We do have that chance with Compass. This is more than a project for us. It is a generational opportunity. It is an opportunity to create lasting economic strength, attract additional investment, expand opportunity for our young people, and position our city for success long after all of us have left public service. We owe that to the next generation. It would be irresponsible to allow an opportunity of this magnitude to go unused or to simply move somewhere else because we fail to recognize what it could mean for the future of our city and our community. Meridian deserves this opportunity because our people have earned it. We're tired, Representative Ford, of coming in second place, and we need some first place ribbons in our city. We are preparing our city for the future, and we are committed to being the kind of partner that welcomes responsible investment while protecting the interest of our citizens. My message is simple. Our message is simple. Meridian is ready, and we're proud that Compass has chosen our city. We're proud of the partnership we share not only with them, but also at Mississippi Power. And we're excited about what this investment can mean, not only for Meridian, but for the great state of Mississippi. Thank you guys for inviting us today.
Well, Madam Chair and members of the task force, I want to thank you for the invitation to appear before you today. My name is Will Purdy. I'm the mayor of the city of Clinton, and I want to just briefly tell you about our experience with data center development, some of the things we've learned from that experience, and some of the things we've implemented to ensure that this industry continues to grow in Clinton in a responsible and mutually advantageous manner. First, let me start with some context. Several weeks ago, we broke ground with Amazon Web Services on a $1 billion data center there in Clinton that will be built at the location of the old Delphi Packard plant. If you're not familiar with that, that's a 730,000 square foot building that once employed nearly 300 of our residents and neighbors, but is set mostly empty since 2009. For the better part of two decades, that property generated approximately $40,000 a year in tax revenue. Under the agreement now in place, it is projected to generate approximately $2.8 million for the city and $4.6 million for the Clinton Public School District in the first year alone, with those figures set to rise further once the fee and lieu period concludes. For a city at our size, that is transformational revenue for our police officers, for our firefighters, for our streets, and for our classrooms. Now, I want to be candid with this committee about the limits of our experience. Ground has only just been broken. We cannot yet speak to years of operational history. But I can tell you that our experience with Amazon as a corporate partner has been excellent. They've been transparent in their communications, responsive to community concerns, and genuinely invested in our community, including workforce development and STEM education commitments that extend well beyond their property line. I can also tell you why I believe this project was right for Clinton, because I believe that speaks directly to the work that this task force is here for. This facility will draw its power from the transmission grid through a dedicated energy substation, not from an on-site power plant. This both ensures the facility does not burden the distribution grid that serves our residents, but also preempts many of the noise and air pollution complaints. It will also not use potable water for cooling, thereby mitigating concerns about our groundwater capacity. And it sits deep within an established industrial park, well removed from any neighborhood. The lesson we take from this is a simple one. Data centers are not inherently good or bad. The location determines the outcome. The operator determines the outcome. and the oversight determines the outcome. That conviction has shaped our regulatory response. When this project began, data centers were a permitted use within our industrial zones, meaning they could locate there as a matter of right. The city has since amended our zoning ordinance to reclassify data centers as a conditional use, available only in our industrial districts. Every future project must now come before our planning commission and our governing board, allowing us the ability to attach any appropriate conditions. We're also developing a comprehensive data center ordinance. It addresses minimum acreage and setbacks from residential property, Tier 4 emission standards, and strict limits on generator testing, a prohibition on backup generators serving as primary power, closed-loop cooling requirements, mandatory noise, water, lighting, and utility studies, and screening and buffering, as well as a decommissioning plan secured by a bond to ensure the city of Clinton is never left holding an abandoned facility. Members of this task force, if there's one theme in Clinton's experience, is that data center development is a profoundly local issue. These facilities sit on local streets, connect to local infrastructure, and affect local families. In Clinton, we have seen what this development can mean when the site is right, the terms are right, and the partner is right. A building that stood dark for nearly 20 years is coming back to life, and the revenue it generates will strengthen our schools and city services for a generation. We're still early in this journey and we're still refining our safeguards, but we are encouraged by what we have seen so far. I hope our experience is useful to this committee as you study these issues for the state. Thank you, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you, committee. Thank you, Representative Ford, for allowing me to be here today to tell a little bit about Ridgeland's experience. I am Gene McGee, the mayor of the city of Ridgeland. And there's been a great deal of discussion about data centers in recent months, and I want to begin with one simple point. Data centers can be a tremendous asset to cities when they're thoughtfully planned, strategically located, and carefully negotiated. The key is not whether a community has a data center. The key is where it's located and how it's developed. In Ridgeland, location was everything. Our campus is located within a technical industrial park adjacent to a major electrical transmission infrastructure. Through our planning and zoning process, we required extensive buffers so that no data center is located closer than 2,000 feet from any existing home. We believe that compatibility in surrounding neighborhoods must also come first. We were also fortunate to negotiate from a position of strength. Ridgeland has a reputation for making timely decisions while maintaining high development standards. That predictability allowed us to negotiate meaningful community benefits rather than simply reacting to a proposal. One of the most significant benefits is infrastructure. AWS initially committed $33.7 million. I'm going to requote that, $33.7 million toward improvements to Ridgeland's water and sewer system. Because of construction cost increases, that investment is now expected to grow to $40 million investment that they will make in our city, all funded by the company rather than our existing taxpayers. Those improvements will strengthen our municipal water system for decades through new wells, elevated water storage, and other system improvements. They will also extend sanitary sewer service to an area of Ridgeland that has never before had the opportunity to connect to public sewer. That benefit's extended far beyond utilities. Through legislation adopted by this body, the state authorized $215 million loan, and I want to emphasize loan, that will be repaid through revenues generated by the project. That financing has already allowed Ridgeland to accomplish projects that otherwise would have taken many years to complete. These projects include overlaying West County Line Road, major improvements to the southern end of Highland Colony Parkway, replacement of an aging bridge on West County Line Road, and construction of Fire Station number 5, including in Ridgeland, a modern training facility. This new fire station alone will improve emergency response throughout our community while helping lower Ridgeland's fire protection rating, producing long-term insurance savings for homeowners and businesses across the entire city. Perhaps the greatest benefit, however, is the long-term financial strength this project creates for our community. Makita has provided us a chart that illustrates projected revenue generated by the project over the coming decades. During the fee and low period, Ridgeland is projected to receive $5.4 million in 2028 more than $10.7 million in 2030 and over $16.2 million in 2031. Approximately 15 million annually during the latter periods of the fee and roll agreement. After the fee and roll agreement matures, annual revenues will remain substantial, generally ranging from 18 million to more than $21 million per year through the years 2040 and 2050. Those revenues represent an extraordinary opportunity to continue investing in infrastructure, public safety, parks, transportation, and quality of life improvements throughout without placing additional burdens on existing taxpayers. The project is not simply about constructing buildings. It's about creating long-term assets, strengthening critical infrastructure, expanding our tax base, creating high-paying jobs, and positioning Ridgeland for future generations. Our experience has shown when local government are given the opportunity to negotiate thoughtfully and strategically, data centers can become transformational investment that benefit both the private sector and the communities they call home. Thank you, and I'll answer any questions.
Get as close to the microphone as I can. Representative Ford, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to be here today with a group of some of the state's greatest mayors. For sure, I'm not a mayor. I am Alan Hart. I'm the Director of Public Works. I have served for Mayor McGee for 22 years now. I'm currently running the Public Works operations as well as Community Development Department operations and economic development for the mayor. My comments are not about data centers in general. What I want to tell you about is the very specific experiences we've had in Ridgeland to help you understand how that may inform future state policy. I prepared a more detailed written report that I will share with Terry on my way out, but I wanted you to hear my words very clearly today, so I didn't give it to you in advance. I'm sorry. I want to begin with a point that applies to every economic development project, not just data centers. Economic development is built on relationships. It is highly competitive. Confidentiality matters. Speed matters. Time kills deals. Every unnecessary regulation, every delay, and every uncertainty gives another state an opportunity to win the project. So I'm asking you to please be cautious about creating regulations that unintentionally make Mississippi less competitive. Good projects do deserve oversight, but they also deserve a predictable process. When the city of Ridgeland was first approached by about a data center, we had many of the same questions people across Mississippi are asking today. Fortunately, our first partner was AWS. Before we finalized plans, several city leaders traveled to Ohio to tour AWS data center construction sites and operational campuses. We had the wisdom of AWS of their worldwide experiences. That trip completely changed our perspective on this use. We stood beside operating facilities. We heard what they actually sound like. We saw how they were constructed. We learned how AWS invests in schools and communities. Most importantly, we learned that many of the concerns surrounding data centers can be addressed through thoughtful planning, engineering, and negotiation. That became our objective. We didn't ask, can this project be built? We asked, what must be done to make this project compatible to be built in Ridgeland? Every major concern became a negotiation. We negotiated water, noise, traffic, construction impacts, compatibility with surrounding neighborhoods, environmental protections, infrastructure improvements, and right-of-way and utility easements that will benefit our community long after this project is complete. Let me give you just a couple of examples. The report goes into a lot greater detail, but I could talk to y'all for 3 or 4 hours. I only have 5 minutes. But water has become one of the most discussed topics around data centers. For Ridgeland, we have a 750-acre AWS site, and AWS has publicly projected approximately 93 million gallons of annual water use. That number sounds enormous until you place it into context. That same usage is equivalent to the water usage of approximately 800 homes. No one is sitting here at a hearing to talk about water usage for a neighborhood. The same 750-acre site could have been developed as approximately 2,250 single-family homes on 1/3 acre lots. Those homes would consume nearly 3 times the amount of water that the data center on the same site is projected to use. Another comparison really puts this into perspective. Ridgeland has great water meter technology. We're able to track the water usage of domestic and irrigation meters throughout the city. I ran a report yesterday of Ridgeland's 1,735 irrigation meters alone use approximately 227 million gallons of treated drinking water each year, nearly 2.5 times the amount AWS projects to use annually. We're concerned about our drinking water, then we need to have a conversation that doesn't begin and end with data centers. It should be about all the significant water users and how we manage this valuable resource. More importantly, and similar to Entergy's presented benefits yesterday, AWS agreed to fund the needed infrastructure to support resiliency for Ridgeland's water system. What began as the $33.7 million commitment grew to the $40 million commitment, as the mayor mentioned. Those costs are not being paid by Ridgeland's existing ratepayers. Instead, our community is receiving 4 new wells, 4 new elevated water storage tanks, and a more resilient water system that benefits every customer in our city. The same story applies to noise. We required and AWS agreed to extensive landscape berms, substantial vegetated buffers, full acoustic generator enclosures, and acoustic fan enclosures that direct sound vertically before approval was ever granted. As a result of good planning, the nearest residence is more than 2,000 feet from the nearest data center at the AWS site. These protections did not happen by accident. They were negotiated. So finally, I want to leave you with one thought. Ridgeland did not simply approve a data center. We negotiated a partnership, one that protects our citizens, strengthens our infrastructure, creates high-paying jobs, expands our tax base, and one that positions our communities for generations to come. Same speech you heard from every mayor up here. I promise we did not meet before this to get our speeches coordinated. I'm not asking for this committee to support every data center or create regulations that support every data center, because every community is different. Every site is different. Every proposal deserves careful review. There's no one-size-fits-all regulation for the state to consider adopting, but I'd like to offer a few recommendations to the committee. First, please preserve local control. Cities and county are in the best position to determine where data centers are appropriate and to negotiate project-specific requirements that protect their communities. Second, we'll double please this one. Please preserve local ad valorem tax revenues. Communities that invest the time, resources, and infrastructure necessary to attract these projects should retain the long-term property tax benefits to fund infrastructure, public safety, and other local priorities. There was an effort in the last legislative session to take an ad valorem tax in excess of $1 billion investment. This would have amounted to 90% of the tax Ridgeland would have received from the AWS project would have gone to the state. No one is more affected by the data center development process than the local government. Let them answer the questions about their projects. And please let the local entities use these funds to completely transform the cities that win these projects. Third, don't regulate away innovation. There are many locations in Mississippi where the electrical grid cannot immediately support large industrial needs. Behind the meter generation can bridge that gap and make projects possible that otherwise would never locate there. I encourage the legislature to support modern, cleaner burning behind the meter generation as an economic development tool, while making it clear that diesel generators are appropriate for emergency backup and not a primary source of power. Thank you for your time. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. I'm going to open it up to the task force now for their questions.
I'm going to start with Mayor Purdy. And I believe you addressed this a little bit in your opening remarks, but just kind of want to reiterate, how does Clinton plan to use the new revenue this project generates? And how are you keeping residents informed as the site comes online?
Principally, we plan to use them to broadly improve quality of life and strengthen core services for our residents. They will go directly to salaries, to street paving, to parks and recreation projects, everything that touches our residents' lives daily. In terms of keeping them informed, we will continue to push out to our communication department any developments, anything that may be going on along with construction that could affect daily life for our residents, traffic, anything construction of that nature. But through the channels we typically do, social media, email and text blast, we've striven to be transparent through this entire process, and we'll continue that through the remainder of it.
A question for Mayor Bland. Over a multi-year build, what does the Compass campus mean for Meridian's budget, services, and neighborhoods? And how is the city planning for that horizon?
So, we have not started to receive any of those revenues yet, like some of the other cities, but we're looking forward to it because it's going to greatly impact our total operating budget. We've seen some flat revenues last year or so, and we look forward to, our annual budget is about $55 million. And like some of these other mayors have seen 20, 30, 40, 50% growth probably in their total operating budgets. We see over the next 8 to 10 years, our budget doubling in size with what Compass's investment is going to be for the city of Meridian. We are trying to communicate to them even today what that's also going to do to our county public school district. But as I looked at some of these kids come in through the doors, what we can do as a city to improve some of the benefits to our city public school district as well. So we know from what their communications has been to us and also what we found out in Red Oak, Texas, that they're going to be a great community partner, and we look forward to that with them.
Thanks for being here with us today, gentlemen. Mayor McGee, my mayor, the great city of Ridgeland, of course. The city just recently adopted several ordinances concerning data centers, and Mr. Hart did a great job of outlining all those various provisions. But this came actually after the agreement was consummated with AWS. So the question is, did AWS, even though no ordinances to this extent were in place prior to construction, did they comply with those provisions?
As a matter of fact, everything that the city of Ridgeland asked them to do, they have done. And we were able to model our ordinance after the negotiations, because if you have other companies and other data centers that come, we want to be sure that they meet the same standards. But we do this in every development, not just data centers. We pride ourselves in having strength in our ordinances to be sure that the development is done in a way that will benefit our city and our citizens and other businesses for years to come. So yes, we didn't have an ordinance then, but a birth of an ordinance came because of the great negotiations with AWS.
But just to clarify, they were actually in conformance with these policies, these standards, even before they became law in the city.
Yes, we asked them and met with them, and I'll have to say Mr. Hart did a great job of meeting and demanding that they meet our standards, and everything we asked for, they complied with. And of course, we developed the ordinance from that.
Mayor McGee, your constituents are my constituents. We represent the same group of people. Gerard, what are our biggest concerns, and what are we doing to meet those concerns?
Well, obviously, there's a lot of rumors out there and concerns about data centers and the noise and what they're going to do to our tax base. It's going to cost people more money for electricity and water and sewer, and all of those things are rumors. What we've discovered and what we're doing in working with AWS and learning that we can require them to do certain things to negate those concerns. For instance, the noise. They have worked very well with us to put in a buffer system. The distance from any home is great. They're paying a lot of money to the city of Ridgeland to provide additional water services, sewer services. And one thing that I'm really excited about is they're paying for a new fire station. And not only the fire station, but a training center that our fire department is going to be able to use to train our officers. And because of that, it's going to reduce our what we have to pay for insurance on our homes and on our businesses. And, that's not just over there where AWS is. That's on the east side of town. That's where North Park is. That's where the township is. That's where Renaissance is, and all of us are going to benefit because of lower rates for fire insurance. And so that's exciting. And the benefits of, we always are proud of quality of life in Ridgeland, and the income that we'll receive from that will be used for quality of life. And that's very important to support our fire and police, to support recreation and parks, to keep taxes low, and yet to provide those benefits that citizens deserve and demand.
Thank you. Information is power. Has there been any discussion about how we can, I know when I get asked those questions, I wish there was a website that I could send people to with frequently asked questions and then the answers to those concerns. What can we give to our people as a tangible? How can they go find out these answers for themselves? Because we don't know what we don't know, but the fear is real. And as a grandmother that has 4 grandchildren that live a mile from the Ridgeland Data Center, the fear is real. And I would like us to come up with something so we can have a place for these people to go to and get their questions asked, if that would be reasonable to ask of y'all to do.
Yeah, I'm actually working on that with AWS, and I have been very vocal about the data center industry in general being very poor at public relations. And the problem was, for the longest time, they kept all of this under strict confidence. It was just part of the process. And what that did was that left everybody else to create the narrative for them. And they did that. And they did that nationwide. There was talk about influences from other countries that created some of that confusion, so on and so forth. You probably all read that. But at the end of the day, I have made it all the way up to level 10 at AWS employment and have demanded that they provide information. And we are told that today we will see the first draft of the Ridgeland one that we're asking for.
And just another point, data centers are very competitive, so they don't want AWS doesn't want somebody else to know everything they're doing. So sometimes you have to pull the information out, but we are committed to get that information where citizens can understand and get what they need to know, so that you don't have to sit there and answer all the questions every day when people are calling you.
Let me ask you this question. Have y'all had issues with noise like South Haven has?
No, as a matter of fact, and Alan mentioned our trip to Columbus, Ohio to see data centers. That helped us to come back and develop a strategy as to keep the noise down. We've even taken our citizens out to the site and let them hear what you can't hear. And so we're with our buffers and all those things, it's protecting and the type of things that we've required them to do is protecting to keep from having a noise problem.
I agree. I've been to the AWS site and my home generator is louder than what I've heard on site outside. Now they're inside. You can hear things once you go inside, but you cannot hear it on the outside. I do have a little concerns about the electromagnetic fields or the radiation. How are we measuring things like that on a local level? I do, data center, I guess in my mind, we don't have the traffic that larger plants have, and we don't have the smell that some of the industries. I grew up in North Mississippi close to a paper mill, and I could smell when the wind was blowing. We don't have the smell, but it's what we don't see. It's what we don't see in the air or hear. How are we measuring for things like that? Or is that something that y'all haven't discussed yet?
I think that would be under MDEQ's purview, quite frankly. The other thing is though, from an electromagnetic field standpoint, you're in one right now. You're next to an electric
Oh.
powered microphone, a
Yeah.
cell phone. I mean, you're already living in it. I don't know that a data center 2 miles away, a mile away, 2,000 feet away increases the electromagnetic field that you're living in. I don't have any research on that, so I'm gonna have to defer to the experts.
I don't have any data on it as well. Do you have an answer to that, Gerard?
Nothing that is substantiated really of any risk, no.
Okay. Anyone else?
So pulling on a thread from Representative Ford's question, Mayor Lee, you referenced going up to Memphis, conducting some of your own tests. Also have referenced going up to some other data centers and visiting. What are some of the resources or technical expertise that y'all need that the task force of the legislature can assist with for your evaluation of these projects?
Is that directed to me? Okay. I guess trust but verify, and that's kind of where I fall in. If you want to talk about electromagnetic waves, think of a microwave. You can look through the glass and see what's going on in there as it goes around. But that microwave is not coming through that glass because of the little holes that you see there. So you're protected from that. So that's a short way to look at an electromagnetic wave. Yes, I went up there because we were pounded with water. We can talk about water in just a minute. Got some data on that I'll be glad to share with you. And sound. So I went to specifically South Haven, then I went to Memphis. So there are 13 data centers scattered throughout Memphis. I went on the east side, got pictures on my phone, and started to bring them and give them to you just for reference purposes. I was probably less than 200 yards away from the generators that are running around actively right now. My sound meter I had said it was about 62 decibels at that point in time, and that was the end of a street in a neighborhood. So I went around on the north side, went into another neighborhood. I saw no homes there for sale, did the same thing, close proximity. Then I went around on the other side, on the west side, standing at a school, and did the same thing. So I've been on 3 sides of that with a sound meter and got actual readings. Glad to share those with you or anyone else. And, I'm satisfied. The thing about South Haven, in my opinion, is as comparison to the rest of those that I looked at, because I went to every one and got out of the vehicle and took a picture with a sound meter to verify that I was at that location. What I see is a huge construction site. You've actually got 2 data centers being built and a power plant. So all up and down State Line Road there, you've got all this construction traffic going on. And I think that's the bigger part of it. So if you look at it as in a construction mode, that's a temporary thing. That's not a long-term thing. And I believe that's where a lot of those complaints that you see that bleed down here to us as well about sound. I had one last Saturday for vibration. I don't know where in the world the vibration would come from a data center. That answer your question? Pretty much. Water, I can tell you that Alan's exactly right. We got hit for a lot of water. And you need to remember the relationships between energy and these data centers is a business relationship. We're not privy to that. That's not public knowledge. It's kind of none of your business kind of deal in a sense. But what I would say about water, when I looked at our water, I've got 2 stations, Mister and another car wash. Both of those use more water than one of these buildings is going to use. If you estimate 350,000 gallons in a month, I've got a nursing home, I've got a hospital, I've got a jail that uses 3 times that much water. So for me, I don't see in our city water being an issue. Now, if you all of a sudden snapped your fingers and you built 10 or 15 of them, then you've got to have some recourse. But these things, it takes at least 2 years to get one out of the ground and get it functional. So I don't see water as an issue in Brandon. We calculated, we've got a 15-foot campus, if you will, projected to be. And we calculated on the front end that we had enough water today to satisfy 6 of those buildings. So not that water is not an issue. It's always an issue for our residents because our ratepayers are paying that. But just like with electricity, the ratepayers are paying for water. They will be a ratepayer. They'll be paying the same thing that we pay for it as residents.
Mayor McGee, there is somewhat of a property tax revolt that's sweeping across the country, including in the state of Mississippi. It may be the most detested of all taxes the taxpayers pay. Of course, in the state of Mississippi, ad valorem taxes, as you guys well know, go 45 to 50% to school districts. And then there's a component that goes, of course, next to counties. In fact, it's pretty much the sole source of revenue to counties. And then there's a piece that goes to municipalities as well. Of course, municipalities also get a sales tax diversion, so which is part of their funding model. So where I'm going with this is there possibly a path that the taxpayers could see some possible property tax relief as a result of these new revenues from AWS?
Well, possibly. I do want to say that for 37 years, the city of Ridgeland has never raised property taxes. And so you're benefiting from that.
I can
already.
attest to that.
And so we very strongly believe that we need to keep the property taxes as low as possible. However, we also need to keep our services high. And so we can't do away with the property taxes, even our sales tax, because people expect good police protection, good fire protection. They want to have streets that don't have potholes. They want to get up in the morning and turn their water on, and they want it to work. They also want to be sure that they have recreation and all those things. So you got to balance those. And I think we've done a darn good job in Ridgeland doing that by keeping our property taxes low, but providing good quality development. I want to brag a little bit. In Mississippi, Highland Colony Parkway is the only road that's ever been built where developers in the city got together to build an 8-mile boulevard road for development. Didn't cost our taxpayers a penny, but you can look there now and see the development that is going on. And those landowners have paid for that. And yes, they're benefiting because they develop things, but working together, development can keep taxes low. I don't see us doing away with ad valorem tax. I certainly believe that we'll, over the years, benefit and not have to raise any taxes for sure, to be sure that we do the services we need to do.
What about you, Mayor Bland? You indicated that you expect your budget to actually increase rather substantially. I gather that some of that's because of investments you're having to make to accommodate Compass, which of course is paying a significant amount of property taxes.
So did Mayor McGee answer the question?
Yes.
He did? Okay. We have not raised our taxes either since I have been mayor since 2013, and I think our city hasn't in 15 to 16 years. So getting to that question, I don't know today if I want to move forward with, saying we're going to lower taxes because we have Compass as our corporate partner out there. So I can't answer that question, but what I can say is we look forward to them coming to our city. We look forward to the things that I know that they're going to bring our city as far as the impacts they're going to make to all of our departments. What I would like for you guys to think about is there's some long-term strategy for us as municipalities as we pay off some of these debts that it's going to take for our infrastructure needs and some of our other city needs. If there are things that you guys can think about doing from a standpoint, we have Mississippi State and we also have MCC. If there's some pilot studies that you guys could do in some of the legislation that you create that creates a pathway for us to train and educate some of our people in our city as you guys come back into office in January. But we are in the beginning stages of certain things. As I said, I think there were some agreements made a few years ago before myself and our new council members came into place. And we're still in a fluid stage with Compass right now and trying to negotiate some of the wants and needs of this administration and the wants and needs of our citizens as we move forward down this line with Compass. And we think that things are going to go well. And again, I think that we're looking at a good corporate partner for the city of Meridian.
So to round out this panel, I want to pose a question for all of you to answer. What advice would you give the next Mississippi mayor or department director, Mr. Hart, whose city may be approached for a project like this?
I'll answer first. Don't lower your standards. Go to the table with what you expect from whoever that development is going to be, to be sure that you protect your city. As was mentioned earlier, I think every city is a little bit different, obviously, but there are certain standards that I know that we required and would continue to require of new development. And we don't back up and don't say, well, okay, we'll negotiate and let you have your way. That's not the way to do it. If they don't want to meet our standards and our needs, then they need to go somewhere else.
Yeah, and I would largely echo Mayor McGee. I think certainly, obviously the revenues are an undeniable attraction for cities on these for us. I think it's hard to really understand the scope and scale of them until you've tried to stretch a city budget to do everything you need to do. I joked, some of you come to know with Roger with AWS, when we had our ribbon cutting the other day, he kept saying during his remarks that this was the Scrappy project they had going. I said, you know, we're in a whole new universe when $1 billion project is the Scrappy one on the block. But, you know, all that being said, all the revenue in the world is not worth anything if it destroys quality of life for our residents. So we have to keep that as sort of our guiding principle and our touchstone. But I do think that if we do so in a deliberate and careful manner, I think the revenues and the opportunities these projects offer cities is really transformational.
I echo what each of these mayors have said, and just forecast out as well as you can as a leader and the mayor of your city, you know, the direct needs of your city for the next 10 to 15 to 20 years, if you can do that as soon as you get to the table with these companies.
I would say recognize and appreciate those that have done a body of work before you. As in this case, I would brag on Ridgeland. Mayor McGee's done an outstanding job, and Alan Hart, and just knock it out of the park. There are municipalities all over the state that probably wish they could have this opportunity. They're not ready. They need to start yesterday getting ready. It's a long, arduous process to update your zoning maps and go through comp plans and things like that. And then it takes some grit to stand your ground. And you've done a wonderful job of that. And I can tell you many of the things that I do, I try to emulate what's already been done. That roadmap has already been paved for us if you just accept it and go on and give accolades to it. So that would be my advice to any municipality out there. But like was spoken to you earlier, in my case, we're sitting on top of an 8-inch where this location is at, sitting on top of an 8-inch gas line. You got dark fiber that's running through the property. All those things that come together to where they're looking for us. We're not really looking for them. We welcome them, and we're there to work with them any way we shape, form, or fashion that we can.
It didn't leave me too much to add, but I will add that you know, lean on your partnerships. There's a lot of friends at the state of Mississippi, your county economic development agency. Work with those partners. Go visit these facilities. I hope this committee has taken the time to go visit operational facilities and facilities under construction. You need to understand and see that so that you can get your public relations in order, so that you can explain this to your community versus them being left with creating their own narrative. And then have your house in order. You're sitting up here with a lot of strong mayors. I am sitting up here with a lot of strong mayors that have their house in order, that can move quickly. That's probably the number one piece of advice on all of this data center conversation is speed to market. If you can't make quick decisions because you have internal fighting going on, you're going to be off the list real fast.
And a final question for everyone. I know this has been touched on. Mayor Lee had touched on this in his opening remarks, as well as Mr. Hart, regarding some legislative considerations, things to preserve and keep, or things to not touch. So really a question for anyone, and Mayor Lee, Mr. Hart, you're welcome to add more to this. In your opinion, what's the single most important action that this task force should consider in recommending that the legislature, regard for data center development now and going forward?
Well, from a city of Ridgeland's perspective, in my perspective, we don't want the legislation that is going to help or to delay us into working with our projects. Obviously, the legislature did a great job in making a loan to Madison County and us, and we are grateful for that. But don't put us in a position where we can't make decisions on our own. and what's best for our city. And I think any city needs that, to have that.
And I will echo Bill Cork's response. I thought we're good where we are. It really worked really well for us. Right now, your state agencies performed magnificently for the city of Ridgeland. It was all very well done. Allow the cities to have the local control. I'm going to also offer the committee, I'll hand this over to Terry as well. This is a copy of our ordinance that establishes regulations that fit our community. Not suggesting you adopt these as state regulations, so please be clear about that. But it very well fits the city of Ridgeland and every other community. Mayor Purdy mentioned his, his are a little different than ours. It fits his community. So at the end of the day, that's where local control really comes in play.
Yeah, I think the best support the state can offer communities is in areas where we ultimately cannot regulate. So most of these issues, as I said, I think are profoundly local issues, best addressed at the community level. But there will always be areas where communities cannot and should not be regulating, utility rates, for instance. I think the support for us from the state is to help us ensure, as I said, the overarching principle always has to be the protection of the city and state residents. That's an area you can help us. I believe the legislature's done a terrific job of that so far through SB 2001. I'm not worried about the utility rate issue. I think the data we're seeing from energy suggests that so far this development will actually reduce utility rate rises for our customers. But at the end of the day, if that is something does not come to fruition, that's an area we'd rely on the state to back us up as cities.
And speaking for the city of Meridian, if there are any issues that we have from a standpoint of capacity, financing, or anything else as we look to possibly expand to multiple data centers, if we need you guys' help, if we come down to Jackson, that whatever you guys can do to help us so that we don't lose out on something because we don't have the ability right now and the capacity right now to be able to deal with it. Those are the issues.
See if I can finish up here. The couple of things come to mind. You've already got all the safeguards and guardrails in place. DEQ, Public Service Commission, everybody, you've got all the watchdogs that would help something like this go on. We all wake up and realize that 3 years ago, you would have never been talking about a situation where you're talking 6 billion, 10 billion, that kind of investment coming into the state of Mississippi. And yet you're dealing with really 6 counties. And just 6 at this point in time. Might be 7. I hear about another one, that kind of thing. I believe that the world is waking up that there's opportunity here. And it's not just in our cities where these employees are coming from. I mean, in Brandon's case, in Rankin County's place, they're coming from Smith County, Simpson County, Scott County, all over the place. And it'll be the same way, similar to Nissan, of where those employees come from. So I would ask that you just consider not to try to micromanage at this point in time 6 counties and municipalities that are working with large-scale companies to revolutionize how we look at ourselves in this state, both educationally, employment-wise, you name it. I think we're on a good trajectory. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, so much for taking the time to be with us today. We've learned a lot from you, and we will have the next panel come up, the data centers themselves. Thank you.
Actually, my question I had, because
That's what I was trying to tell you. Troublemakers. Yeah, like, do I need to call security? You know, there's securities in here, but I just want to make sure I didn't need to
that's thinking time. Yeah,
be down. They just want us.
I mean, I think. Yeah. Really?
I almost said, but he took it out. I didn't. I wanted to. I will. You need. With people. Okay, is everyone ready to go ahead and get started? Want to welcome the panelists from our data centers that have located here in Mississippi. Before you present your opening remarks, would you please introduce yourself and your organization? And after you have given your opening remarks, I will invite the task force to present our questions. Please speak into the microphone and push the button for the green light. Thank you. We'll start with Ms. Hutchins from Amazon.
Good morning, Co-Chair Ford and members of the task force. My name is Andrea Hutchins, and I work on the economic development team at AWS. Since joining AWS, I've had the opportunity to work directly with communities across Mississippi, and they all hear me say, and I truly do mean this, Mississippi is my favorite. There is a lot going on here, some because of our investments, but most as a result of the ingenuity and spirit of the people right here in the Magnolia State. For the last day and a half, you all have taken the time to learn about data centers, and I really think that that's emblematic of the point that I'm about to make. While many across the country are arguing and scrambling over this topic, you all are having real, meaningful conversations, expanding your knowledge and ultimately the way you will legislate. At AWS, we spend a lot of time differentiating ourselves from the masses. And in Mississippi, you all have given us a chance to show up in a very meaningful way, and we don't take that for granted. This year is actually AWS's 20th anniversary of building data centers, 2 decades of doing this work. Mississippi is a relatively new partner in that story, and as we've only been part of the state since 2019, we didn't break ground on our first Mississippi data center until April of this past year. So in some ways, we're still early in this relationship, and we look forward to continuing to build in the right way. Now, let's get to some numbers because I know that's what we all like to discuss. Since 2019, AWS has invested more than $10 billion in Mississippi through fulfillment centers, delivery stations, solar and wind projects, and a Whole Foods market that I visited last night. That's already more than 7,000 Mississippians employed directly and over 20,000 indirect jobs supported across the state. Since breaking ground just over a year ago, we've got about 6 data centers live, and those facilities are actively employing well over 500 operations employees and thousands of construction workers. As you all know, on April 9th of this year, we committed to $25 billion in planned investment, creating 2,000 high-skilled permanent jobs across our 4 campuses in 3 counties, Madison, Hinds, and Warren. The jobs in our facilities, often referred to in our industry as blue-collar tech jobs, include data center technicians, engineers, network specialists, operations managers, and security professionals. Real careers, not just paychecks. That makes Mississippi home to one of the most significant AWS investments anywhere in the country, and again, my favorite. None of those jobs matter if Mississippi's can't fill them. That's why we brought our I2PA program, the Information Infrastructure Pre-Apprenticeship Program, which is a mouthful, here, and we're partnering with Accelerate Mississippi, Holmes Community College, and Hinds Community College. Holmes was the first college in Mississippi and only the 3rd in the country to offer it. It's paid, it's 4 weeks, and it's hands-on. Fiber, optics, electrical systems, data center operations, and so on. Really making Mississippians employable across a variety of sectors in our industry, not just in data centers. We've also put a mobile training lab on the road so communities without a campus nearby can still get access. Since 2024, we've invested more than $12 million in Mississippi workforce and education, reaching more than 700 workers and 7,000 students and thousands of educators, something that we are very, very proud of. When we say we have become part of the Mississippi fabric, we aren't simply referring to the infrastructure. We are part of the future generations with our investments in Think Big Corners, which are STEM learning spaces, in every elementary school in Canton, reaching about 2,000 students a year. We've committed $400,000 in local grants for education, sustainability, and food security. And in 2022, we delivered over 326,000 water bottles and 1,000 filtration systems to Jackson households in need during the water crisis. Beyond data centers entirely, Amazon's broader footprint in Mississippi, including fulfillment logistics, retail, is more than $5.8 billion, supporting over 7,000 direct jobs and 11,000 indirect jobs. I know you've been having conversations over the past day and a half about energy consumption, but it cannot be overstated that with regard to energy, we're paying 100% of our grid infrastructure costs tied to our campuses, 100%. That's not a cost passed on to ratepayers, and our investment is helping enable Entergy's Superpower Mississippi grid modernization effort. On water, every site, as you heard this morning from our partners here in Clinton and in Ridgeland and so on, every site is evaluated individually. And across our Mississippi campuses, we're investing more than $190 million in combined and local water and sewer infrastructure, leaving each system with far more capacity than we actually use. Before I close, since the task force did ask for recommendations this next session, I want to leave you with 3 thoughts. Some of them have been echoed by previous folks, which means they must be a good idea. But first of all, we'd like to recommend don't slow down on what's working. Mississippi is doing a lot, as you've been hearing, to attract investment. And they're already winning investment because of the environment that you all have built here over the past few years. We'd encourage the state to protect that certainty rather than introduce uncertainty. Second, keep growing the collaboration between the public and private sector workforce. We've heard some great examples of that yesterday when Courtney was here, and there's real momentum to build on there. Third, keep investing in programs that turn AI into real practical use cases. The best example of that right now is the Mississippi AI Innovation Hub. On our side, AWS funds the proof of concept work and provides the AI and machine learning curriculum for the university teams and provides the cloud sandbox environment and credits the students build in. We'd love to see that model grow. As an economic developer, I can tell you that I'm excited at seeing the announcements that continue to flow through this state. They continue to make me in awe and really excited about the future of the supply chain here in Mississippi. So once again, just saying that, we're really excited to be here as a state. We really do appreciate the opportunity and the trust that you have provided us as an organization and look forward to our future together.
Before you start, Mr. Collard, would you scoot over just a little bit so you can get in the screen when you speak, we can see you. Thank you.
Thank you for having us, and thank you, Chair Ford and members of the committee for having the industry. My name is Heather Coyle. I am a senior manager of state policy and partnership for the Data Center Coalition. The Data Center Coalition is the member association.
Sorry, I will start over.
Please do.
Thank you, Chairman Ford and members of the committee for having us. My name is Heather Coyle. I am a senior manager of state policy and partnerships for the Data Center Coalition. The Data Center Coalition is the member association for the data center industry. Our members are comprised of data center owners and operators, as well as companies that use large amounts of data. If you think of Oracle, OpenAI, those are members that use large amounts of data, but aren't always necessarily managing their own data centers. We also have a industry advisory council, and that is comprised of folks within the supply chain and within the data center industry, including construction companies, chip manufacturers, various different companies that provide different parts that fit into that diverse ecosystem of the industry. All of our members are visible on our website, datacentercoalition.org. You're welcome to take a look at that. We have seen tremendous growth in the industry, and we are very curious about the future and what it holds for Mississippi as well as the rest of the country. I think a lot of folks are not necessarily particularly familiar with a data center. I started my career at a data center in downtown St. Louis. It was the recession of 2009, 2010, everyone was kind of looking for a job. I was working for a temp agency and started doing administrative work and then marketing work. And I was very excited to have an opportunity, but I said, what is a data center? No one really knew. And back then we were talking about the move over to cloud computing and how, you know, rather than having all of these kind of server racks that are within a company, you know, on their premises, we would aggregate all of that and have it within these climate controlled environments that are much more efficient. So a data center, you know, is really at this point your credit card processing. It is your financial institutions, all of the healthcare services that you see, big box stores, you know, geolocation services as you're turning on your GPS and moving around. That is a benefit that is brought to you by data centers. And without data centers, these things would not be possible in our current economy. So when we look at the industry, I think it's important to note that all of the growth that we've had, but then also the aggregation of the collective computing demands, it kind of leveraged economies of scale, and it made it so that we're able to receive significant efficiencies. So from 2010 to 2018, computing output rose 500%, while the energy consumption only rose 6%. So while we are in a significantly high growth period now, that principle still holds true. We're still really doing this in the most energy efficient way, and customers and businesses will generate twice as much data in the next 5 years as they did in the previous 10. We still have 1/3 of the global population still needing to come online. And the average household, you, me, we have 21 connected devices. That means that our laptops, our watches, our thermostats, Ring doorbells. I have a German Shepherd, and so I have a Roomba. I can start it from my phone, and that's brought to me by data centers. If you have teenagers, you can double that 21 number. That's probably about how many, you know, connected devices you have in your own home. It's a fun exercise to take a look and take an inventory. But all of this requires real digital infrastructure. And cloud is really underpinning everything that we're doing right now. 95% of Fortune 500 companies use the cloud for their storage needs. And at its core, data centers are innovation. They're innovation in the economy. They're innovation in the products and services that we rely on, and innovation that helps the United States drive as a global leader and a global economy. I wanted to touch on Mississippi specifically. We were talking in the last panel about, you know, how we wouldn't necessarily have talked about AI or data centers 3-5 years ago. And so I wanted to illustrate the kind of current landscape of the industry. In 2024, the data center industry in Mississippi held 3,030 direct jobs, but the total employment contribution, all of that diverse ecosystem, was 13,710 total jobs. $768 million is the total contribution to labor income in 2024. And the industry contributed a total of $1.3 billion to Mississippi's GDP in 2024, which was a 26% increase since 2023. The total contribution to state and local governments was $140 million in 2024. 100 million of that was to state government. $41 million was to local governments. And the industry itself contributed $13.5 billion to Mississippi's GDP in 2024. All of this is available through a study that DCC commissioned through PwC, formerly PricewaterhouseCoopers. It's available on our website. But I wanted to just illustrate where we are currently. Now, as I mentioned, this is from 2024, which means that data is around a year old. We've seen significant growth since then, and our members will illustrate kind of what those projects look like. But there's a lot of growth. There's a lot of already existing data centers in the state of Missouri or Mississippi, but also a lot of opportunities for growth in the future. So we welcome the discussion and thank you for having us today.
Thank you, Chairman Ford and members of the task force for having me today. My name is Brett Collard. I'm the Senior Vice President of Land Development at Compass Data Centers. I bet you've been hearing a lot from your constituents about data centers, both questions and concerns. The truth is that our industry has been too slow to speak up. When you don't explain yourselves, misinformation fills the gap. And every day that goes by, those opinions, many of them based on fear or false belief, get dug in a little deeper. Communities are right to ask hard questions. We must earn our place, not assume it. Let me start with some things we've heard that you've probably heard too. Residents don't want electricity rates to go up. They want water to be used sparingly. They don't want noise to be a nuisance or have jobs disappear once construction is done. Here's what may surprise you. Compass Data Centers, we agree with you. Data centers shouldn't raise your electric rates. We agree. That's why Compass Data Centers pays our own way. In Meridian, new substations, transmission lines needed to power our campus are fully funded by Compass, not added to residential rate bills. Across all of our campuses, we've paid over $300 million for grid improvements and transmission infrastructure, which keeps everyone's electricity bills lower for longer. Data centers shouldn't drain your water. We agree. Since our founding 15 years ago, we've used Zero City water for cooling. Our closed loop systems recycle the same water indefinitely. The water we use annually for everyday office needs is roughly equivalent to 2 average households. That's a fraction of what a standard office building that size would use. Data centers shouldn't be a nuisance to neighbors. We agree. Our campuses operate at or below noise ordinances with setbacks, acoustic enclosures, berms, and sound dampening landscaping designed in form day one. When a neighbor near our Northern Virginia campus in Leesburg was bothered by a single band frequency, we didn't argue. We explored it, we looked into it with our partners, and we fixed it, then recalibrated every unit on our campus that we own. Data centers should create real lasting jobs. We agree. We've created more than 6,400 long-term jobs to date, and we'll have created 11,000 jobs by the end of 2027. The operation jobs that follow pay 30 to 50% above the local average wage. Right here, we're expanding our MEI Data Center Pathway program with Meridian Community College to give local students and job changers with no experience the chance to build a generational career in one of the fastest growing industries in the country. We are launching the program and holding a job fair in Meridian at the end of July, which Bill had mentioned earlier. And most important, we build lasting relationships with the communities we call home. Roads, schools, workforce programs, and even a $15 million animal shelter we're building in Texas. These are the kinds of investments we make because we're committed to being a good neighbor, not just a good business partner. In total, we've invested more than $277 million in community improvements across all of our projects to date. You can check us on that. Because at Compass, our actions and words are one. As a 100-year neighbor, we are accountable to the communities we call home. Here's one of the biggest problems Not every company calling itself a data center developer is the same. Land flippers buy land and power rights, never intend to build and flip it for profit. You may never meet who's involved. Short-term developers build on speculation or plan to sell in a few years. They have no reason to invest in your grid or your schools. Compass is different. As a Class A community first developer, we have a stake in our communities because our projects are 100-year assets that we own and operate for the long haul. We built a Class A checklist so any town, county, or legislature can consider what kind of developer they want in their community. Ask the hard questions. Has this company ever finished a project? Do they plan to flip the site or sell it? What have they invested into the grid? Use the checklist as a scorecard and measure Compass too. Sorry. This is not a sales pitch, it's our standard. Set the standard, pick the right partner, and the industry will bring real lasting opportunity. Good paying jobs that build generational careers, a bigger tax base for schools and public services, long-lasting community investments that benefit residents for decades. I won't pretend this is simple. Growth like this raises fair questions around traffic, water, power, and who's looking out for taxpayers. And a Class A developer wants to build trust before anything else, because we know successful projects depend on partnership. In Red Oak, Texas, Compass launched the MEI Data Center Pathway Program with Texas State Technical College last year. After 2 classes graduated, the rapidly growing waiting list inspired us to donate a $12.6 million, 40,000 square foot building to the school so that they could expand the program. In Hoffman Estates, Illinois, we're turning the empty, boarded up Sears headquarters into a modern data center campus. The mayor calls it the new economic life of its town. Here in Meridian, Bill Hanna, head of East Mississippi Business Development Corporation, put it this way. Since Mississippi Power brought Compass to our community, we continue to be impressed by the people and the simple, straightforward way they do things. They do what they say. That's the high standard we hold ourselves to every day. Mississippi Power is supplying roughly 500 megawatts for our Meridian campus today. We're paying for the new substation and transmission infrastructure ourselves, dollar for dollar, through a contribution in aid of construction. We also built in demand response, which is the ability to pull our load off the grid during a heat wave or ice storms so that homes can stay powered first. We're a shock absorber for the grid, not a drain on it. Mississippi can set the standard early and choose partners who will be here in 50 years, not 50 months. As a Class A community first developer, Compass shares your interest in seeing the Meridian community and the state of Mississippi thrive because we are a part of it. Every community doing data centers well shares one thing in common. They planned ahead. They set the standard, then chose a partner who could meet it. Our CEO, Chris Crosby, likes to say data centers are the railroads of the 21st century. 100 years ago, the towns that planned for the railroad and built around it are still thriving today. The ones that didn't got left behind. Mississippi is at that same moment right now. My ask to this task force is this: don't let misinformation and noise cost Mississippi families the life-changing benefits of this investment. Give communities the tools and resources to make smart investment decisions for themselves. Demand accountability. Set high standards and equip your cities, counties to negotiate strong agreements. But don't let misinformation or the bad actions of others elsewhere cost Mississippi the benefits of this once in a generation opportunity. Thank you. I'll be glad to take any questions.
Any questions?
I'll start with Ms. Coyle. From your view across states, where has policy struck the best balance between competitiveness and accountability, and what should Mississippi borrow?
I think right now, as an industry, a lot of the states are kind of doing different things. So we have a lot of mature markets. There are there's significant investment, of course, in Northern Virginia, which is the data center market of the world. Chicago is a fairly mature market. In Phoenix, that is also a fairly mature market. I think right now, it is really not handled at the state. So what we're seeing is a kind of shift from the local regulation to a broader kind of a broader interest in state legislatures to provide some guardrails around the industry. Virginia did a year-long study. It is the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Committee, known as the JLARC study, where they looked at the industry and its impacts. And they were able to use that to inform a lot of their decision-making around policy. I think that Virginia is still very much a kind of work in progress. And what we are seeing now is rural communities having the ability to take advantage of tech investments that were previously centered in California or on the West Coast. And so now, the local opportunities are much greater. I think that we are kind of working through the regulation in a variety of states, but most of it has been around local. And I think that the best policy is really designed around data, around studies and information that they've obtained through those studies. That allows us to give a more informed, process. But I would probably look to some of those more mature markets to see, how they have previously kind of dealt with the industry as a whole, but with the caveat that, the regulation around the industry is something that is fairly new at this level. And so, making sure that the policies are specific to Mississippi and both the challenges and opportunities that you have in the state.
Ms. Hutchins, would you like to answer that?
Right. So I'd like to maybe take a little bit of a different approach to that response. We came here and initially started our conversations back in 2019, as we've all heard this story, several times. But the piece of that story that I think really is an opportunity for Mississippi to lean in on is how incredibly creative you all were with attraction legislation in particular. And so maybe instead of thinking about things in terms of a regulatory standpoint, there's an opportunity to build on the supply chain that has been discussed over and over again, I think, over the last 2 days, that is unlike any other place, I think, in the country. A lot of it is happening here organically. And I think with some real foresight and some thought and some, working together of this group and the entire economic development community across the state, I think you stand a real opportunity to create a supply chain network here in Mississippi using that creativity, that speed to market, that ability to create outside of the box opportunities through partnerships that I don't see happening any other place in the country.
I'll ask Mr. Collard. You kept saying Class A, that Compass is a Class A. Did you give yourself that classification, or is there someone that gives you that classification? And is XAI that classification as well?
I won't speak on any other data center developers in this space. We feel that through our actions and our words and how we develop in a community, we've earned that reputation as a Class A developer. It's a term that is typically provided to industrial developers, but we feel the way that our partnership within a community, our development standards meet the Class A guidelines.
Okay, just making sure. It seems like, I'm just going to say it, it seems like Amazon and Compass is the golden rule for, in my mind. I've been to an Amazon campus and I've seen what it's like. I've not been to Compass, but I've not heard anything negative about it. I just want to make sure we're not just allowing anybody and everybody to come into our state that doesn't want to adhere to the same set of standards that we would like to set for ourselves. So. that's all I
Thank you
have.
for those kind words. We agree, and we did share a developer checklist that every county, it's up on the podium behind you, that we believe every county, state, and any legislator should be looking at for any data center developer.
We ask XAI to be on this panel as well, just to make sure you're clear on that. Any other questions?
This question is for Ms. Coyle. You, in your remarks, you touched on some of the use cases and applications of cloud computing, of course, which is powered by data centers. But one of the popular grievances and complaints about data centers we hear is that these big buildings were not necessary a few years ago, and they're just big surveillance centers that they're just being used by big tech and government to collect lots of private information and store that inside these facilities to be used in some sort of malicious way in the future. Can you talk about that?
I cannot speak on behalf of our government, but the data center growth that we are seeing in Mississippi and throughout the country is a result of demand. I think all of us, have memories of 2020 and kind of what happened when everyone kind of switched on to working from home using virtual meetings. And all of that required a significant amount of infrastructure. And businesses changed. They changed the way that they operate. Some folks kind of kept work from home as a key part of their workforce. And it provides tremendous opportunities for folks in areas that don't have jobs that, those folks are qualified or interested in. But really, a lot of what we're seeing is the switch over to just a more energized and interconnected world. And it is your bank records, it is your hospital records. A lot of folks, when we have these policy discussions, and right now I'm on a task force around zoning in my county. A lot of folks don't realize that private businesses, those Fortune 500 companies, a lot of them have data centers, their own data centers on site. And you'll have a data center right next to a hospital. Why? It is because if, you are in cardiac arrest and they need your medical records right now, the proximity matters. So the latency, which is the amount of time it takes for data to move from one place to another, that is very important in certain industries. Healthcare is one of them. And so you want to have the data centers kind of close to that end user to make it so you're able to access it quicker. And then for things that are not as latency sensitive, you're able to house those in places kind of further away. And those systems work together. But all of this really fits into demand. And it is what all of us are doing, every day in our engagements on our phone, on the internet. We are always really interacting with data centers. If you're connected to Wi-Fi, you're typically, engaging with a data center in some way. And so the demand is us. The demand is kind of the movement of our economy. But it is, not something that is nefarious in any way. I think that a lot of us really enjoy having access to our banking records, our healthcare records, being able to kind of walk around with a full-on computer in our pockets. But, your choice is really whether or not you want to opt in. You don't have to engage with, you don't have to use email or anything like that. But the ability is, it's increasing, and it's also very important that we kind of look at the data center infrastructure as infrastructure, because it is allowing us to be able to use all of these services that really help us in our everyday life. Things have changed. If you think about how your internet usage, your business's internet usage have changed over the past 5-10 years. The data centers are being built up to support those changes, and it is infrastructure the same as our telecommunication or our energy infrastructure is today.
Ms. Hutchins, can I double click on something, to use an Amazon term? I think we've been hinting around, and I think in some of the earlier panels, you know, we've had this incredible run of investment in the state of Mississippi, and then the conversation sort of becomes, what do you do, right? And so we sort of heard there's some other growths happening, but the supply chain thing that you mentioned is a very specific double click, right? It's a way from an ecosystem perspective to sort of take those wins and something more with it. So I'm not sure if there's a question in there. I just wanted to acknowledge, and I said this earlier, you know, zero expertise in economic development, but that question gets talked about a lot. Like it's, you know, in these areas in Virginia or the Research Triangle in North Carolina, like how do you pair, you know, academia, great universities with government and business and sort of incubate these things? But that supply chain idea really sort of lends something somewhat more specific strategically to doing something and growing. And I just wanted to sort of acknowledge that. I probably said way more than I know, but really getting to that question, right? Getting to that beyond growth is growth, and, you know, which I think is true, but that's a very kind of detailed and specific place that the state could think about doing something more with.
Yeah, I concur completely. And, you know, as somebody who has 20 years of economic development experience, it's a rare thing to see something happening organically. And I think in the industry, we know that whenever something is happening organically, it really does point to a real opportunity for incubation. And I think incubation really is the key phrase there, because it is something where, you know, I think for those of us who have ever had lawn maintenance issues, you know, you can see some things they incubate on their own and they can become problems. They can become unwieldy. In other instances, they might die off if they're not tended to and cared for. And so I think as an industry here, you've already seen companies who are doing manufacturing for servers and racks that are opening up. You're seeing companies that work on electrical components that are opening up. I think we really getting to the point of why it's certainly not just proximity. Right. I mean, there's other places that are approximate to, you know, our campus and Compass's campus and so on. I think that there's a lot more to that story. I think certainly that Mississippi does have a very unique business environment, but I think doubling down on that environment, getting to the core of why those things are happening organically, and then working through both MDA and legislation to ensure that that does continue could be a real win for you all.
Thank y'all for coming this morning and sharing your insights. We've had some discussions about the controversial aspects of data center development. How can this task force and the legislature balance legitimate business interest, confidentiality with the need to inform the public sector on both the benefits and the cost to development?
Well, I think first, what you're doing here today is the first step, right? I think, you know, again, you could be allowing for misinformation to just be, you know, out there and be the only information that's being spread. But, you know, certainly some of the takeaways that will happen from today's session, you know, both in the media and then in upcoming legislative hearings and committees, I think is incredibly important. I would say, I think that there is also an opportunity to ensure that going into the next legislative session, that you are not legislating out of fear, rather legislating with really proactive opportunities to ensure that you do end up with what you want, both as a state, certainly as a committee. But, you know, I think there are a number of states that are doing things the right way. But in most of those states that were mentioned earlier, a lot of it is being handled at the local level, just because what is happening in the southern part of Mississippi is completely different than what is happening in the northern part. And so I think the real opportunity for the state, and this is certainly one of the reasons that we're here, is you all had an initially passed legislation to attract AWS, right? Now the burden is on us on the compliance portion to do what we said that we were going to do. If we don't do what we said that we were going to do, those benefits stop. And so I think that there's a real opportunity for the state to consider how can you continue to encourage those good actors to locate here? And then how can you help partner with the local governments to ensure that when they do find a good opportunity, that they're poised to take advantage of it? One of the key things, and I know you all have probably heard this a million times, but maybe everyone out there hasn't. One of the real opportunities in Madison was that the site that we located there was already ready to go. And so there was a real speed to market, but that was enabled by the state. And so I think continuing to work with the local municipalities and counties, when they have an opportunity, help them double click on that opportunity, especially if you do plan to build out the supply chain component. There could be components of this industry related to manufacturing and industry that we haven't even seen or realized yet. And so again, I just feel like that flexibility here at the state and that creativity with a smaller group of very nimble legislators is what makes you all attractive.
Kind of a follow-up. So I view that as kind of shared responsibility, not just for the state task force, but what else can the private sector do to contribute to that discussion?
Well, I think, from a private sector standpoint, it's very similar to maybe any other economic development opportunity. We encourage them to hire locally. We encourage them to partner locally. I really do think building a robust infrastructure from the ground up is something that, again, it is kind of happening here organically. I think it was mentioned earlier, I work on projects outside of the state of Mississippi, unfortunately. And some of my construction partners that are working on construction here that are Mississippi-based companies, they're working in those states with me. And so there's really this mentorship, partnership ecosystem that I think is starting to form here. And so I think continuing to encourage that is really key. The workforce components that the state has invested in, one thing that I have seen some other places do, and that I guess maybe could be a cautionary tale, sometimes they invest in a certain industry, and especially when it comes to workforce, they think if they invest, they get everything spun up, everything gets moving, it's fine, we're gonna set it and forget it and leave it alone, and they never invest again. And it becomes 10 years, 15 years down the road, and they are still pointing to, well, in X year, we did X. Well, that was 15 years ago now. And so I think maybe there's an opportunity to start thinking about, okay, this legislation and this investment was initially passed in 2020, 2021. Well, again, that's almost 5 years ago now, right? So what does the next investment look like in workforce and in education? I think really being forward thinking during this next legislative session could be the way to go.
Mr. Collard, what factors drove your site selection and what specific commitments has Compass made to the Meridian community for the phases ahead?
There's a lot of factors that go into data center siting. I believe Mr. Cork answered it earlier that one of the key factors was the abundance of high quality fiber in the region that runs right through Meridian and through to Jackson and between Dallas and Atlanta. That's number one. Number two is the power opportunity that Mississippi Power and Southern Company has presented in the region. And the transparency and the partnership that was developed between Compass and Mississippi Power to find a suitable opportunity, not only for Compass, for Mississippi Power, but for Lauderdale County, for the city of Meridian. That's what really drove us here. And then, entitlement and permitting requirements as we go and look for new sites. For Compass, it's all about partnership. We have to have like that open line of communication with city officials, elected officials, county staff, city staff, because without that, it's never going to be a successful property for us or for our customers who lease the campus from us.
I'd be happy to talk about citing considerations of the industry, more generally. So as Brett mentioned, of course, that network availability is incredibly important. The access to energy and, clean energy is something that members have an interest in or ways to, subsidize that in some way or use power purchase agreements. That is something that is a main siting consideration. Land availability and cost. That's one thing that Mississippi definitely has a leg up in. The low risk of climate or natural disasters is something that is very important to data center companies. And then a skilled construction and technology workforce is something that is important. And, in the event that that does not exist within the area, it is something that these companies work to build, as they've mentioned. What we're seeing across the nation, when I started at DCC almost 2 years ago, the big conversation was around energy, and it continues around energy. However, what we're hearing from members time and time again is that the main siting consideration right now is a community that wants the investment and a community that is willing to work with the company to build out what that's going to look like for the community. And so our siting considerations have changed a bit to be more kind of personal. And that is something kind of as an industry we are working around. And different members do it differently. The examples here, of course, have really built exceptional relationships with these communities. And that is something that we aspire to do as an industry.
Ms. Cole, do you, it sounds like you've been everywhere and you've witnessed a lot of issues. Is there a state or an area, a city that does well educating their citizens? Like I mentioned earlier with Mayor of Ridgeland, have we considered a website where people can go frequently ask questions, getting those answered?
Yeah.
What are we doing to help the concerns?
That is something that, this is relatively new. So I, from a framing standpoint, I think it's important to kind of mention October, November of last year is when we really started to see a lot of kind of discourse around data centers. So we're reacting as an industry and we're reacting as an organization. I think that in terms of best practices, having a public affairs component, some members do data center tours where they will, bring elected officials and community leaders to view different, data center facilities. Open forums, they've done, those type of things, but also websites, there's a lot of misinformation out there. And the companies that are, doing that front end work, they are able to kind of thwart off a lot of the discourse that is based around misinformation because it's, kind of easy to correct. As an industry, we're, working together to kind of figure out our best practices on the policy standpoint, or what are the things that not necessarily we can agree to, but that we're already doing as an industry and that we can illustrate through agreeing to different policies. I think that that's important. But I think the public affairs component is something that we are working on kind of growing. And I think it is a good practice to have some sort of community engagement. What that looks like is going to be different depending on the company. Not all of them can do data center tours. If they're housing, anything for the government, any type of confidential, data, there are a lot of security concerns. But I think right now we're trying to just provide more light into the industry. One thing that I did want to touch on as well is a lot of, at least from our perspective, a lot of the pushback is more not necessarily around data centers like as a physical infrastructure, but a lot of concern around AI, a lot of concern around technology in general. Right now, AI is about 25% of the compute that we see in data centers. It is definitely expected to grow, but it's not all the growth of the industry. A lot of what we're seeing being built out right now is cloud computing for all of the different services that I mentioned previously. So I think it is, dependent on the infrastructure that they're hosting as well. If you're having, more of an AI data center, then we should probably, talk about closed loop systems, talk about the different efficiencies that are being used for those type of facilities. But I think education and just, an open dialogue is really important as we move forward and increase these investments in the state.
One more question for you. What's the estimated useful life of a data center, and what do you anticipate these buildings being used for once they've reached the end of their life?
We have had recently some conversations around decommissioning and questions from legislatures and local folks around what that would look like. I have asked on a couple different work group calls. I don't have any examples of a data center being decommissioned. That's kind of where we are. That being said, these are concrete buildings for the most part. Sometimes the exterior will be, changed to fit with the aesthetic of the neighborhood that they're in. But they could hypothetically be repurposed for, things like manufacturing. However, I find that incredibly unlikely. Our interest in our, connectivity is something that is going to increase over time. In the event that a data center were to be, a company were to not continue to host data centers, it typically would be absorbed by another company or purchased by another company, the same way that you see in energy and telecom. I don't think that we're going to see a whole lot of, decommissioning, but the average lifetime is around 25 to 30 years. Some of them now can go up to 50. They're becoming a lot more, there have been some efficiencies in that as well. But I think they'll probably just keep refurbishing them because our interest and our need for this connectivity and for the infrastructure that supports it is just going to continue to grow.
A question for Ms. Hutchins, but Mr. Collard, you're welcome to answer from your perspective as well. So Ms. Hutchins, Amazon's stated Mississippi commitment is 25 billion and about 2,000 permanent jobs across its Mississippi sites. Is that a fair number to state?
Yes.
Can you tell us how those jobs are defined and whether that's direct operations versus contractor roles? And what share do you expect to be filled by Mississippi residents?
Sure. So out of those 2,000 jobs, those are direct jobs. So there's certainly a number of indirect jobs associated with it. As you mentioned, there will be contract work for security and a variety of other things necessary to run data centers. On occasion, we do bring in specialists who have very, very specialized skills, maybe to work on a project. But overall, those 2,000 jobs will be operations positions. So network operations, facilities management, data center engineering, what we just refer to internally as operations positions. The other question that you asked about them being Mississippians. So Joey Deason earlier was correct. So it is about 60% of all of the jobs that we have filled so far have been Mississippians. I can tell you our operations personnel are wanting to work very tightly with Courtney and her team, and I believe have already been in contact with them because we did have some interesting findings. As a tech company, I'm sure you can imagine that we track everything, and there are very specific roles where over 90% of those individuals are coming from Mississippi. Some of those are very technical, some of those are not quite as technical. And then somewhere in between, we are having a more difficult time attracting that particular talent. But certainly from what we've seen from the training programs that we have developed here with I2PA and similar, we know that, once we're able to get that Mississippi workforce trained, that hiring them is certainly not a problem. And so I do think that there's probably a gap that has been identified, which is fantastic because now we can fill it. But certainly at least 60% of those positions overall will come directly from Mississippi. And then as time goes on and we've got more and more individuals who have been, trained, I think that number will only increase.
Yeah, I agree. For our campuses, we're closer to 70 to 75% local employee base. Obviously, we're just getting our operations and buildings kicked off in Meridian today. What I'm most excited about is exactly what you were referencing as well, is the opportunity for for pathway programs into the mechanical, electrical, and information technology space. There's a dearth of jobs available that can be filled with today's employees. And the Texas State Technical College curriculum that we kicked off and that we're gonna proceed with at Meridian Community College really allows a 12-week program for anybody with a high school degree and above to come in and get into a crash course and then be placed within our partner programs and our suppliers, such as Caterpillar, Siemens, Cummins, and others, to be able to then step into their apprenticeship programs and then walk right into a really, hopefully, high-paying job locally. So it's able to attract local talent and keep them staying local.
Go ahead.
Ms. Hutchins, can you tell us by any chance how many of the current AWS workforce in Madison County that are permanently employed in position are H-1B visa holders?
I do not have those numbers, but I could certainly find out for you. Yeah.
You're aware, and I'm sure Ms. Coyle, you're aware that the entire technology industry is under tremendous scrutiny over the termination of American workers and what at least appears on the surface to be replacement with lower cost H-1B visa labor. I hear about this all the time on my radio program. Anything about that?
I think our members, I haven't heard, a lot about that from our members. Our members often rely on local, labor, and we have great partnerships with, organized labor in various different states. I think that one thing that is very interesting right now is the workforce is changing. So I worked for a trade association in the construction industry. And when we think about skilled trades, typically folks are trained to do kind of one thing. So they're trained to do pipe fitting, they're trained to do plumbing, they're trained to do HVAC. Right now, because of the data center boom and because it is so significant and it's such a significant part of the construction workforce, the work that they're receiving, folks are needing to have kind of dual training where they're able to, work on the, HVAC system, but they also need to be able to do a little bit of process piping, which is typically something that is reserved for a pipe fitter. And so the training is changing quite a bit. I think that would be challenging to do with, someone who wasn't in the, country full time. If they're only here for a short duration, it does require some additional training. And I think that as a general rule, our members try to hire local. And if they're unable to hire local, they try to train folks, when they see those gaps, they build the systems and the programs in order to create that workforce pipeline that they need in order to continue and build their operations.
Ms. Cole, I'm not sure you were in the room when I asked my grandmama a question earlier, but having 4 grandchildren that live within a mile of AWS Ridgeland campus, there is a concern, not the traffic, not the construction traffic, not the smell. There is no smell, not the noise, but the concern that my son and his wife has, and myself as a grandmother. Do we have any data on what the possible radiation or electromagnetic emissions from these data centers?
I do not. It is something that I can, look into. We don't see the same type of health concerns as other types of investments. So, a data center is a building that uses electricity. It's not a smelter plant. You're not going to have a ton of emissions or anything like that. The components are, housed within the facility. There are setbacks, but there's a lot of people that work in data centers, and I worked in a data center, and I don't know of any health health concerns as a result of that. I think that is something.
Is this a new fear that's coming maybe October, November, like you had mentioned earlier? Is this a new fear that they're,
I think there's an unknown. So when I worked in the telecommunications industry, there was a lot of kind of concerns around 5G. There's concerns around those type of networks. Anything that is, fairly new, I think that people are, when there's an information gap, people fill the gap. And whether that information that they fill it with is accurate or not, it really depends. If there was data on it, I think that it is something that, we would be sharing and making sure that folks were taking the necessary precautions, but that simply just isn't the case. I think that it is, folks trying to just trying to find answers where, there's some uncertainty. And yeah.
I was just gonna add that, for Compass, we're studying the EMF to ensure that for our customers, if there's a high level of EMF frequency, it impacts the servers, it impacts the operations of a data center. So we're constantly looking into it to ensure that there is no EMF disruption inside of our campus itself. So, what do we do when we come in? We're looking to ensure that there is no EMF capacity concerns, because that can have an impact on the operations of a data center.
good to know. What about Amazon?
So unfortunately, I'm on the economic development team and not the team that tracks this particular issue, but I can definitely get you some answers. I will tell you just from my own personal standpoint, because I, also have looked into certain things like this from a health standpoint. Most of the EMF producing devices that exist anywhere on the planet are things that are generally Wi-Fi connected. And the fact that the servers themselves are connected through fiber tells me as an individual, this is not me speaking as an Amazonian, but tells me as an individual that I personally do not have concerns about going into or spending long amounts of time in or near a data center. Again, that is for me personally.
Thank you.
To round us out here, I'm going to ask the same question I asked of our economic developers earlier this morning. Looking 5 years out, what measurable outcome would demonstrate to Mississippians that these developments have succeeded for them?
I think that the developments themselves being successful will come in large part from the infrastructure investments that we're seeing. I think a lot of the infrastructure investments in the communities that we're operating in are developed in such a way that they are not meant to only benefit us. I think through infrastructure investments, you will see additional housing infrastructure investments. I think you will see additional commercial investments. And then certainly, I know we've talked a lot about hiring Mississippians, but certainly there's nothing wrong with folks moving here, right? I mean, because that becomes a net economic developer. So I think seeing some new jobs that exist in the state that are being filled by folks who are excitedly moving to the state. I think from an Amazonian's perspective, we always have folks who have never been to Mississippi who come here and absolutely fall in love with it. And I think seeing that not only from, the folks who are already here, but from the folks who are hopefully going to be moving here, but truly a flourishing community and each one of the areas where we have invested, but also in the state and in our partners as well. I truly do get excited when I see other data center developers and folks like, we just saw the announcement from Jabil last week, perfect example. So I think, again, continued investments from outside companies, continued just seeing the payoffs of those infrastructure dollars really coming to light. I think that's what success looks like.
Yeah, I would, point to the data that, I shared earlier, those, 3,000 direct jobs, 13,000 total employment contribution. Let's look at that a year from now. Let's look at it 2 years from now, 5 years from now. All indications show that, in the event that this is done right, those numbers should increase. And it really is a testament to good policy and good planning on your part. I think that the growth of the industry could at least be quantified, through that data. And it is a study that we look at every year and, happy to kind of follow up and provide that data. But the, $13.5 billion contribution to Mississippi GDP in 2024 is very significant. And we would love to see that number increase significantly over the next 5 years.
And then from a Compass perspective, obviously, we want to see the local economy flourish. We want to see our partners with the city of Meridian, Lauderdale County, continue to see the investments into their communities, into their schools, the infrastructure, the roads, the bridges, et cetera. We want to see all of that come to fruition, and we expect to fully see that come to fruition. From a Compass perspective, our investment with Mississippi Power should hopefully allow for continued investment into the grid and continue to strengthen the grid and reliability for the state of Mississippi itself. We feel confident that the jobs are here and the jobs are going to continue to grow, and the Pathways program that we're going to deploy at Meridian Community College will allow for local jobs to staff our campus locally.
Any other questions? As we close these 2 days together, I'd like to leave us with a thought from Mississippi's own history. In 1930, only about 1.5% of Mississippi farm homes had electricity, the lowest percentage in the nation. Many questioned whether it made sense to build miles and miles of electrical infrastructure across rural Mississippi. It was expensive. It would change the landscape. There were questions about who would benefit and who would pay. But Mississippi became the proving ground. In 1934, the federal government selected Corinth, Mississippi, as a site for what became known as the Corinth Experiment, which demonstrated that rural electrification could work. It transformed our farms, our schools, our hospitals, our businesses, and ultimately the quality of life for generations of Mississippians. History teaches us something important. Every generation faces a technology that seems larger than life. The telegraph, electricity, the automobile, the interstate highway, the internet, and today, artificial intelligence. The question has never been whether technology will continue to advance. It always has. The question is whether we will have the wisdom to guide it responsibly. That has been the purpose of this task force, not to blindly embrace every new technology and not to reject innovation out of fear, but to ask the hard questions, listen to every perspective, protect Mississippi families, and position our state for the future. We have a responsibility to be good stewards, not only of innovation, but of the people we represent. I believe these conversations have moved us closer to that goal. Thank you to every presenter and to every member of this task force. Your willingness to engage thoughtfully is exactly how good public policy is made. Senator Williams and I are working on scheduling our next task force meeting, but as of now, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
All right, buddy. Over.